That was Hot Chip with Motion Sickness, and you're listening to the Baller Skeptic Roundtable, episode 10 on Wednesday, August 12. I'm your host, John LeBon, and that song was recommended to me a long time ago by an old friend of mine, live from New York, David Weiss of Deep Inside the Rabbit Hole. David, how are you this morning?
I'm doing very fine. Thank you for playing my song, finally.
Well, I think we've played that about 4 times this season, and like I said on my impromptu show yesterday, that song has grown on me. It's probably in my top 5 favourite songs of all time, David, thanks to you.
All right, no problem.
But you know a man who also enjoys the old Hot Chip Motion Sickness, coming to us live from Spain via London, Matrix Decode. Matrix, how are you this afternoon?
Hey John, good to be here. Yeah, I like the chat. It's a nice one. Looking forward to the show.
I'm looking forward to it as well. This is, of course, the 10th episode of our first season, and this is the last pre-planned guest that we've got, and possibly one of the best guests of the lot, if I may say so. So let's get straight into the introduction. Our guest tonight launched his own blog. Just got some audio feedback there. Sorry about that. Our guest tonight launched his own blog in 2008 and spent the next 6 years covering a range of topics, including mysticism, Freemasonry, media hoaxes, the ills of modern society, transhumanism, and so forth. During this time, he released a number of books to accompany and build upon the detailed posts at his blog. Then in November 2014, our guest published a series of posts with the headline Earth Hoax ? Since then, he's uploaded a number of videos to his YouTube channel, which has now attracted over 3,000 subscribers. And his most recent upload is a feature-length documentary entitled Flat Earth, The Edge of Awakening, which I'm sure that we will discuss in just a moment. Coming to us live from Spain, we are pleased to welcome to the Baller Skeptic Roundtable Mark Knight of WaykiWayki. Mark, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, guys. Good to be here. Yeah, I'm very excited.
Now, you did have a little bit of running around to do before the show, so we apologise to the listeners in the live chat. If you are listening live, there is a live chat function, so please feel free to join in the discussion there. Now, Mark, we are very lucky to have you on the show. I want to give you a few moments now just to give the listeners who aren't already familiar with you a chance to get to know you. So give us your basic background, going right back to when you first started questioning what we're told by TV in school, and then take us on a little journey to how you got to be where you are today.
Hi, guys. Yeah, it's quite a strange journey, really. I was like a normal guy sort of working in London, what people call a nice job, and I was starting to work a few things out. And a few catalytic things happened personally where I just decided to quit my job, and I had a bit of money stashed because I never really bought into the mortgage scam. I sort of went traveling, and I started meditating and doing some more holistic things. And in this time I started looking at documentaries, books, different people out there at the time who were Stuart Wilde, even David Icke at the time, and a few others. And I started waking up to stuff, like the whole system being a bit of a scam, and the media, and this sort of narrow reality tunnel we were in. And I sort of knew there was no way back, so I just went on this sort of mission around India and Guatemala and other countries where I was sort of thirsty for knowledge. And this took me to some yogis, monks, and places like this, and some mystics. And I just started having these crazy experiences and learning all this stuff that we're sort of not told. And I sort of ended up with some shaman as well. And in all this time, I was sort of reading and writing, and started doing my first books and created the blog, which was really for me. It wasn't for like an audience. It was like, okay, I want to write an article.
Is it just me, or have we lost Mark temporarily there?
We lost him.
I should say for the listeners, Mark had some troubles with his internet connection. He's coming to us from Spain, and I understand that they've got a bit of a heat wave at the moment, so he might have some technical difficulties throughout the show. Mark, can you hear us?
Yeah, he said that it's 120 degrees. The internet in his neighborhood fried. He's been running from pub to pub to find Wi-Fi access, and found a place, but now something happened.
Well, Mark, if you can hear us, we can't hear you, so you might need to leave the Hangout and then come back. And while you're doing that, we'll see if we can cover your absence. We'll go to you there, Matrix. It is pretty warm in Spain. You can corroborate Mark's story.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's like late 30s, early 40s here. It's degrees centigrade, and Yeah, it's very close. It's just hard to escape this heat. But I prefer the heat, and I'm sure Mark does too. Spain. Sometimes the internet here is a bit dodgy, also. So hopefully you can sort it out.
Well, in the meantime, there's no harm in us three having a discussion on the air. We generally talk about things off the air these days, so it can't hurt to have a chat on the air. What I'm going to do is I'm going to play a video of WaykiWayki. It's the first video of his that I ever saw. I'm not sure if you linked me to this one, Matrix, a couple of months ago, if I found it by myself, but it's the monkey interviewed about flat Earth. So while I'm loading that one up, do you want to just give us your thoughts, Matrix, about what's been transpiring in the flat Earth movement over the last week?
That's a big topic there. I mean, there's been some interesting stuff going on. There's always new videos coming out, and there's lots of cool people making videos about the flat Earth and questioning it and doing experiments. There's stuff on the moonlight being cold, and I mean, there's all kinds of things going on at the moment. We had there was the Morgile appearance on Art Bell. That was been a bit controversial with the way he was treated on that show. For people discussing that, and there's all kinds of stuff going on at the moment. So it's exciting.
It is. We might get a chance to chat about more of that in a moment. I think we've been
Blind them for
Well, almost.
Once again, I do apologise to the listeners. Mark, we heard some of what you just said, but it came through a little bit disjointed. Do you want to try again?
Yeah, he's trying to sort it out there.
Let him sort that out.
Well, while he's sorting that out, I've got an idea. I'm going to screen share a video that Mark put up, and it looks as though, from what I can tell, this is the first video that he put up on his YouTube channel with regards to the topic of flat Earth. So why don't we play this one? It's a 6-minute clip. We might just play the first few minutes, and we'll see if while we're doing this we can get Mark to sort out his technical difficulties there. Now, this one's called Monkey Interviewed About Flat Earth on WaykiWayki, published March 10, 2015. Hopefully the listeners can hear this and enjoy it. We're up to 40 people watching live. If you're just joining us late, we've got with us Mark Knight of WaykiWayki, and unfortunately he's in Spain at the moment. They're having some issues with the heat wave and their internet connections. Mark, are you able to hear me right now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Excellent. It looks as though you've been logged in twice. I'm not sure what's happening there, but why don't we pick up from where we left off? We'll come back to the monkey in just a moment. While you were fixing up your computer there, I was playing your monkey video from back in March. It was the first exposure that I had to your work. I thought it was very funny. We'll share the rest of it with the listeners in a moment, but let's pick up from where we left off. You were just telling us about how you were traveling and you bumped into some shamans and they led to you expanding your mind. Do you want to pick up from where you left off?
I just sort of went on this journey for a few years where I was sort of thirsty for knowledge, and just through synchronicity ended up with these sort of mystics and shaman and doing these retreats and different things. And after that, there was sort of no way back, there's no way back to a sort of job in London at an office. And I've sort of been chatting to Eric DeBay over the years, on and off, the odd email, and he sent me his book. He said, well, look at this. And I was like, well, this is crazy. This is like, you've been hanging out with too many young girls in Thailand. Something's made you go a bit weird, or CIA's got to you. And I thought I'd debunk it in an evening. I thought, well, this would be easy. It's one of those crazy ones, and I'll debunk it just to help Eric, get out of his crazy hole. A week passed, and I couldn't really debunk it. And then I think 1,000 hours of research passed, and I couldn't debunk it. But what I could start to debunk was the ball Earth model. So I first fell into the geocentric model, and I was firmly on board with that. And it sort of took me another 6 weeks to get into fully on board with the flat Earth model. And then I started dishing out some articles, and they got a lot of traction, and a lot of people were sending me emails, and I looked into it further, and it was like the information just came to me, and it was like something I understood quite simply, and something I can do quite well. I can gather a lot of information and sort of shake it down to a presentable state. This is something I used to be able to do in my 20s with what I was doing in my career at the time. So I started to really enjoy this sort of research. It was like, this is our reality. What else is there to research? Someone's golf swing or new alloy wheels on the car. This is all nonsense. But researching our reality is about as exciting as it gets.
Well, I noticed I went through your blog as preparation for tonight's show, and I should say for listeners too, I'm coming from Brisbane, so it's almost 11 o'clock at night here on the Wednesday night. So I was going through your blog earlier today, Mark, and I noticed that for the last few years you've been covering media hoaxes. You even covered the Sydney siege hoax from the other side of the plane. So you've been into this stuff for a while. When did you first come to understand the size of the lies, the magnitude of the deception taking place in our schools and on our TVs?
This was probably like 7-8 years ago. I just read loads of books and watched tons of documentaries. And then also with, say, having shamanic journeys, you come back from one of these sort of journeys and you look at this sort of narrow reality tunnel we're forced to live in. And that helps you realize as well, this is all a big load of nonsense. This is a big lie. And you start to see lies everywhere. But you speak to people and they're sort of, I know about 9/11, I know about the banks, but they're like, they don't want to go further because then they're like, we don't know what to believe. That's kind of a healthy place to be. If you sort of say, well, everything I've been told from school and the news and authorities, if all of that, I draw a line through and I start with a blank canvas, this is kind of an intelligent place to be at. Because then you're looking at everything with fresh eyes. But this is a place where it's too much for a lot of people to go to. There's no handrails, there's no banister, and a lot of people don't want to go there. Whereas I was sort of forced to go there.
Well, I know that you said in your interview with Lisa Harrison back in July that you spent some time away when you were travelling. When you came back, you felt it hard to, I guess, reintegrate into society because you could see that the way that people were living was toxic compared to what you were used to because you'd been away from the TV for so long. And I think this is a common experience when people take a break away from television and from the kind of conversation that television watchers engage in. When you try and come back to it, it's not easy because it's not natural. Do you want to expand upon some of the studies that you took part in to do with the Kabbalah and some of the rituals that you took part in when you were on your travels?
Yeah, I'm happy to touch on this. I was studying a lot of stuff like Buddhism and yoga and a bit of Hermetic philosophy, a lot of the sort of alchemists, philosophers' own books, all their riddles. And I thought it was a bit of a crazy synchronicity, but I ended up at this place in Guatemala where they sort of pretend they're a yoga meditation place and people whiz through there in a month or so and they think it's a yoga meditation place. But I saw some symbols there and I saw the people who ran the place. And I worked a few things out, stayed a bit longer. And they're actually a sort of mystery school with the lineage back to Egypt. And I spent like a year and a half there studying a lot of Kabbalah, Hermetic and Hermeticism. And this was sort of on my radar because in my first book, it was I talked about secret societies and how they obviously studied Kabbalah. And that leads a lot of conspiracy theorists, stroke researchers to just say, oh, that's bad. And it was good because I could research it and see for myself whether it was bad, And what I learned in this time, it's not bad or good, it just is. And everything sort of sits on its meditative glyph, the tree of life. So it can be used for harmonic reasons, it can be used for destructive reasons. It depends on the practitioner, shall we say. And I went quite deep into it using a couple of 50-day silent meditations, which was sort of fasting as well, which is like quite a trip. You end up in a very different space because your sort of personality falls off. You sort out your own past, your emotional crap, shall we say, from the past. It's a bit like peeling an onion. You end up at that essence in the middle. And as you lose sight of words, the Kabbalah can give you sort of an energetic framework, an energetic climbing frame, or a glossary of terms to climb around while you're in this sort of state of essence, shall we say. But the Kabbalah can be used for many things. It's like it could be looked at as a magical correspondence table. It could be looked at as a way to know thyself, a way to know the macrocosm, a way to know the microcosm. It can be used for so many things, and it's very hard to give an introduction to. The Kabbalah is sort of something you dive into, It's like a big ocean. You dive into it somewhere and you sort of swim around, picking bits up as you go. It was a very interesting time because I was sort of studying Buddhism and other different Taoism and some other bits, and I couldn't get that deep into them. But the Kabbalah, being a Western philosophy, I found I could go a bit deeper into it. Because I see there's a lot of Westerners, and they're doing yoga and stuff, and they're talking about all these Sanskrit words and remembering all these lists. This is all really for the Eastern mind, but the Western esoterica is really built for the Western mind. And I found it very, very interesting, obviously including the astrology, the tarot, and all the other things that come with it.
Well, I know that Matrix and Dearth both have some questions for you. I'll throw to them in a moment. Before I do, just quickly, you were chatting with Lisa and you said that you currently live in Spain and you alluded to living on the mountains. Do you want to give listeners a basic background on the lifestyle that you lead today?
Yeah, the past 5 years I was living up a mountain, just got some wild land and put some yurts there, some water, solar panels. It's quite a cheap way to live, really. There's an initial outlay, and then you sort of grow food and maybe get some animals and go for it, really. And I was living up a mountain. It was like 5 kilometers away from a village. But now, the past year, I live up another mountain, about an hour away from the last one. It's a bit closer to a village, like a 10-minute walk. And it's off grid. It's like there's no cables going to the land. There's no post. It doesn't really have an address. So it's kind of free. It's about 10 years ago I made a decision. I want to get rid of post and I want to get rid of alarm clocks. There are two things that didn't serve me, so I chose to eradicate them from my life. And that sounds a bit crazy to a lot of people, but it can be done. You can make your own laws. You can make your own decisions. You can just sort of say, well, I don't really like post because it's all computerized nonsense that wants stuff from me. And you can just say, I don't want it. I just don't want that post stuff. And if it's important, someone can come and find me and have a chat with me. I'll make them a cup of tea and see what the problem is, see if we can work it out. But the whole post thing, I just got a bit bored of it. Every time I opened post, it was like I wasn't feeling good. So I just got rid of it. And when you live off grid, you fall between the cracks. You're not really in the system. But yeah, you have a passport and maybe a visa. But you got your toe in the system, but the rest of you is out of the system. And I find it a really nice way to live. Before, we could say I was sort of like more money rich with no time, but now I'm more time rich. And no one really talks about being time rich, but I think this is something that's really good. It really works for me. So I can follow my passions and be creative and study flat earth and other things, Whereas other people have to go to work, come home, a bit tired, throw on some flat earth stuff and go to sleep maybe, So I'm a big proponent of living off grid and, getting out of the system. Because it's all very well talking about freedom and putting stuff on Facebook. It's better to walk the walk,
Well, in the live chat, we've got 50 people watching live, and Ella says that your lifestyle sounds amazing to her. So the basic summary is that you went away to travel for a while, you learned some things and studied some things, you came back, you found it hard to reintegrate with Western society as it is today. Fast forward a little while, you find yourself writing a blog, you're exposing media hoaxes, talking about mysticism and these kinds of things. And then we get to November 2014, and you publish a blog post about the Earth hoax with a question mark. Now, you said that you've known Dubé for a little while. Can you tell us how you first came to be in touch with him? And is it the case that when you read his book, The Flat Earth Conspiracy, that was what converted you to become a flat earther? That hasn't happened again, has it?
I think it has.
Damn, because that was the question I was most looking forward to asking. What we'll do is when he gets back, I've been asking the question so far. I'll give you and Matrix a chance to ask him some more questions. As you know, David, I like to let the listeners get a basic idea of the background of someone so they can see that the realm of questioning the ball, being skeptical about the ball, it's not just for creationist flat earth Christians. In fact, I don't think a single guest that we've had on the show so far has come to this through that channel, if that makes sense. And I think it's important listeners get to know that.
It's are you saying that creationists would be the primary flat earthers? Is that what you were saying, John?
That's not my belief, but I put to you, maybe not in your city or in your country, but certainly where I'm from, if you were to suggest to someone that you knew someone who was a flat earther, they generally would immediately infer that that person was raised a creationist flat earther, because who else believes in the flat earth? Dead people from 500 years ago or crazy Christians? And so when you introduce yourself or someone else as a flat earther who is not the stereotypical flat earth creationist, in many cases, that in and of itself can shake their paradigm.
Yeah, I mean that's the opposite of who I was. I had no religion in my life, and when I discovered the flat Earth, I think it's brought creationism into my life.
Yeah, so your story is similar to mine, I guess. I was not raised religious, and then I went to university. I read Richard Dawkins' The God Delusion. I was completely on board with the atheistic worldview. I had no reason to really question any of what we're told is science. Really, it's not questioned enough to realize that it's all a scam. And Matrix, you're there in Spain as well. Maybe sometimes you do speak in a way that seems a little bit more religious. I'm not sure if you've ever actually said on the air whether or not you were raised religious.
Yeah, I wasn't raised religious. I mean, I'm more into the whole spiritual dynamic of it all. I mean, I think we can learn from the religions, the various different religions and philosophies, and seek truth. I mean, my awakening process did involve, I looked at Christianity for a while, and but like Mark, I also looked at the occult and different systems, black magic. I was curious about it. I wanted to know about these things. Wanted to understand them a bit better, because there's so much symbolism and these secret societies and so on. But for me, I've always believed in a creator. I wasn't raised religious, but I've always thought that there was we live in this place that has been created for us, and so for me, it's the flat Earth is really it's interesting how the old religions like Christianity, Islam, and what have you, and even in older cultures, ancient cultures, talk about the flat Earths in their texts and so on. So this new awakening to the flat Earth has really made me look at those texts like the Bible, or the Quran, or what have you, in a new light, and given them new meaning to me. So I think it's I definitely have respect for those belief systems. I think there's a lot of truth in some of them, and there's a lot of metaphor and allegory too. So I think something we're trying to all figure out. What is the truth?
Well, one of the topics that we're planning to touch on with Mark during the show is ancient mythology. So we'll come back to all of that, Matrix. But Mark, you've rejoined us, I understand.
Yep, I'm back. This is one of the things in Spain in August. Nothing really works too well, so I apologise.
No, we understand. We appreciate you taking the time to join us, especially given the circumstances. Now, just before you dropped out, we were just talking about how you've known Eric Dubay for a little while, and you got a copy of his book, Flat Earth Conspiracy. Now, when I was listening to you on another interview, you seemed to suggest that by trying to debunk his book, you found yourself all of a sudden a flat earther. Can you talk us through how you came to know Eric Dubay, and then what happened when you got a copy of his book?
Yeah, sure. Well, me and Eric had sort of been in touch, just a few emails a year over the years. I think he was sort of like, I like that article you did, and I liked a couple of his. And the odd chat about the platform we were using, which was Blogspot at the time before Google bought it out. So a few loose chats, a few sentences, a few chats. And then I was having a chat to him like last September or something, and he said he'd been researching something for a few years. And I said, what? And he said, well, flat Earth. And I was like, oh dear, he's gone a bit crazy. He's been hanging out with too many young girls in Thailand. Something's gone to his head. Or the CIA's got to him. He sent me his book, and I thought I'd debunk it in an evening as a bit of fun after my dinner, and I sort of couldn't. And I got a bit annoyed, so after a week of trying to debunk it, I sort of rolled up my sleeves and thought, right, this is serious, let's really debunk it, or I'm going to go crazy. So then it turned into like 1,000 hours research. It was like a month solid study, not just on Eric's book. This was like a launch pad, like a junction, like a train station leading me onto other stuff. And the more I looked into it, the more I could debunk the ball Earth. And then I sort of became very much into the geocentric model and sort of battled with the stars, especially the stars in the southern hemisphere. So some days I'd be like 50% flat, some days 80%, some days 60%. I'll be bouncing around for like 2 months until I finally got it and had this sort of realization that was sort of inside me, like, yeah, the thing's flat.
Well, we were fortunate enough to have Eric Dubay on the show. I think it was episode 5. I might be mistaken, but it was Eric Dubay's work that really inspired me to do more of my own research. And I'm thankful that I listened to one of his podcasts back when I did. Did you read his book, Atlantean Conspiracy, back before you read his stuff on the Flat Earth?
Yeah, that is a book I have scan read, should we say. Yeah, I am well aware of the content.
Well, what we're planning to do tonight, we've got a few topics we want to touch on. If we get the time, Mark, we're going to talk about the awakening of the Flat Earth, your recent book to do with the moon entitled The Moon Function and Cataclysm, the Tunguska smoking gun, as you call it, different models of the Flat Earth, ancient mythology, and then if we get time, we'll also touch on recent happenings in the Flat Earth movement, if you want to call it that, and in particular, the recent debate between Art Bell and the Morgile. So that's the rough rundown for tonight's show. But before we get to that, I think it's important that the listeners get a chance to understand the guest better. So, Mashal, we'll go to you first. Any introductory questions that you have for our guest, Mark Knight of WaykiWayki?
Yeah, I mean, hi, Mark. I've had a similar experience to Mark in a way, having lived overseas in Asia for 10 years and traveling, and, it kind of broadens one's horizon and perspective, gives us perspective on the system, the corrupt system, the mind control, the media manipulation, and, it sends us on this journey of truth seeking, and, it gets us into the occult and researching the occult, if you like, the hidden layers beyond the mainstream and so on. I just wanted to ask him about, what areas of researching the occult, besides the Kabbalah and that, would you, interested you the most?
At different times, different information. So one time, I was quite an extremist. So one time I'd do like a month on my own and study astrology and like eat and breathe astrology for a whole month. So then that month, astrology would be my thing. I'm reading the old mystics' view of astrology, not the new guys, not the more new age recent guys. I even touched on things like evocation magic I looked into for a while, gematria, the Hebrew letters. I mean, the list is endless. The list is massive. But I suppose the thing I went deeper into was the Kabbalah tree of life. But it's not something that now I wave a flag on and say I'm a this, because I'm really strong on not defining myself. I don't like labels. I don't like to define myself. I don't like to say I'm a this. Even if I studied one thing deeper than others, I wouldn't say I'm a this. I'm really big on that. Even if I study, whatever I study, I don't want to wear a hat saying it. So I'm very big on not defining myself. But I suppose also I looked into astral travel and lucid dreaming and these things for a while, which was pretty fun, pretty scary, pretty dangerous. But that was super interesting, and I would say one of the best things any human could study in their lifetime here is probably lucid dreaming and astral travel.
Yeah, it's a fascinating collection of subjects you mentioned there. I mean, it's all due to, points towards what is our reality, what is our existence, and this whole flat Earth subject is really, we're seeing, it's opening our eyes to all kinds of things, old stories, mythology, symbolism, and, deeper meaning to our existence. So, yeah, I mean, I'm fascinated by what, your journey. It's something very similar to mine, I think, and probably lots of other people, in searching out the truth.
Hey, I've got a question for you, Mark. You mentioned your shamanic journey, and you had some ayahuasca ceremonies. I've done ayahuasca 4 times. I had 4 ceremonies with a shaman, and that was prior to my awakening to the flat Earth. And thinking back on those experiences, I am still trying to sort out what I saw and what I was told, and relay it to the flat Earth. And it's very difficult. My question to you is, were you awake to the flat Earth before one of your ayahuasca sessions, and how did it all come together?
No, I've not done any entheogenic plants since the flat Earth awakening within myself, but this is something that would be very interesting to do, to go into that realm with a pure intention of seeking more knowledge or information upon this very subject. Because I also worked with the Wachuma cactus for a while. This is going back a bit, not so much recently, but I do still grow some. And it is possible to go into that realm with a very clear intention and pull something out. I think my third book, well, my third and fourth books were both, I was playing with some information. I went into that realm and pulled out some stories. So you can go in and pull something out if you're very focused. It's quite hard. It's a bit like a tightrope. But I think it's very, very sensible for a group of people or someone on their own to go into that realm seeking some answers upon the flat Earth and the ball Earth lies.
Yeah, it's whatever your intention is, whatever your question is, if you clearly define it before you do ayahuasca or something similar, that's the question that's answered. And of course, I didn't even conceive of the question, is the Earth flat? But what I saw in several of my sessions was, these massive, I'll say flat plains, but I don't know what it was, with geometry, sacred geometry, the flower of life. I saw all this stuff, and then somebody posted on a ball Earth. I'm in a flat Earth group, and I mentioned it in the last show, where you take all of the ley lines of the Earth and all of the intersection points where all the sacred temples and pyramids are. If you take those points and put them on a flat Earth map, it shows the flower of life. And I've been trying to, get a better picture of this, but that is the most incredible thing I've ever heard, and I'm trying to relate it to what I saw on my ayahuasca journey, and I need to go back.
Wow, that's super interesting. Yeah, this is another area of information that's super interesting, is looking at temples like the pyramids, Easter Island, and dotting these out on the flat Earth. I mean, yeah, the flower of life. I mean, this is a symbol seen all around the ancient world, China, Egypt, everywhere. And this could be related to these sort of overlapping planes.
Yeah, I mean, for those of you that are not aware of the power of the flower of life, it is everywhere. It is in everything. It can be charted out in every plant and every living thing. Just do a little research on it if you're unaware, and there's a rabbit hole there that you'll never come out of.
Yeah, there's a guy who wrote a book on the flower life. I think his name was Drumvalo Melchizedek. I just want to warn people against his work. He sent a good friend of mine to a mystery school in the Ukraine, and it was sort of like some dark Sith Lord, and everyone was he was harvesting a lot of sex energy. So I got some big questions over that Drumvalo Melchizedek guy who wrote 2 books on the flower life. I would advise people read their own way on the flower life research, or you might end up somewhere dodgy in deep Ukraine.
Yeah. John, you back?
Yeah, so we've got our little introductions out of the way. We've got a few topics that we're hoping to touch on with you tonight, Mark, and thanks again to everybody in the live chat for coming out. Just want to request that you try and treat each other with a bit of respect. I've only had to ban a couple of people tonight. Let's try and keep it that way. Now, the first topic that we wanted to really get into tonight with you tonight, Mark, was the awakening of the flat Earth, and I think this is something in your videos that you expand upon rather eloquently in a way that can resonate with people. This idea that what's happening right now in the online alternative communities, with more and more people starting to question the shape of the Earth, this isn't just something that's going to go away. It's something that's only going to pick up speed. Do you want to give us some of your thoughts about how this awakening, as you call it, is taking place and where you see it heading?
Yeah, in the documentary I released this week, I wanted to talk about the awakening, because people are talking about the numbers or this, the moon, the stars, or the horizon. And I was really talking about the awakening. I mean, I've spoken to some people who have been through turmoil. Some people have split up with lovers. Some people are falling out with their parents. Some people have had like an internal trigger where they've gone a bit crazy and they're like the whole reality's fallen apart. And, some people maybe have ended up on some tablets. And this is a big thing. And what I was trying to say in the documentary is it is a big thing. I mean, this is our reality, the construct of our reality changing. And someone put a really good quote on, I think it was on Facebook. He says something like, most flat earthers believe it's flat. They don't know it's flat. And this was a really good quote. I mean, there are people, it's like a hobby to them. Oh, yeah, I go to work, I'll watch a TV series and do a bit of flat earth research. And that's okay. But if you do believe it's flat, if you do know it's flat, what's happened inside you? Have you gone out on your own into nature and had a look at things again? How does this massive change sit with you? How are you gonna be open with it with your friends and family and new people, or are you gonna hide it from people? How are you gonna be in the workplace? I mean, because if you're hiding it from loads of people, and internally you believe something, it's gonna create an imbalance. So I was looking at all these things, the actual internal awakening. Forgetting the books, forgetting the documentaries, forgetting YouTube, forgetting Facebook. How does it sit within you? How is the dust settling?
Sorry about that. Mark, are you still with us?
Yep, I'm still here.
Yeah, excellent. So in the recent documentary that you released a day or two ago, you were talking about how, from what you've seen this year, the flat earth thing has picked up, and now you can go to these flat earth versus ball earth debates, and the flat earthers are killing the ball earthers in the debates time and time again. And then you also touched on this with your interview with Lisa about where this flat earth thing has come from, because since Mark Sargent's clues back in February, it really has taken off, and you were speculating about why you think that might be. Do you want to share with us and your listeners tonight your views on where this has all come from?
Yeah, I think we all need to be super aware that this could be, I'm not saying it is, I'm giving it like 60, 70%. This is highly possible something the controllers, the elite, whatever words you want to use, the CIA, whoever, they want us to know. Or they want this to be big at the moment. We know these people are super clever. We know that they do cognitive modeling on the truth movement. We know they've got agents in the truth movement. This is highly possible something they want us to know. For whatever reason, I'm not sure. But we should be aware that we could all be being psyoped, So I could be writing my articles and I really believe them, but there could be something behind us all, like behind this even radio show. Not saying that you guys know about this, but there's something pushing this. Maybe there's someone putting extra hits on the YouTube counts. It's just getting so big so quickly, and it's like they could stop it, but it seems to be getting bigger. So I think we should just be aware that this could be a big psyop. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying it's wrong information, because we can prove it with the horizon, with the curvature, with all these things. But I'm just saying that there are people who might want this information to come to light now for some reason in a few years. I think it's something we should be mindful of.
And what do you think their motivations might be, whoever it is, if this is being pushed from above rather than organically from just regular YouTubers and bloggers? If this is coming from above, it's being pushed, what do you think their motivations might be?
I really don't know. I mean, it's a blank canvas. You can put anything on there, some sort of something in the sky happening that's man-made, some sort of new world order, some sort of event where they create a one world government. Everything's on the table. I've thought about it and I just don't know. But something inside me does say, this has got real big, real quick, and it's being really pushed, it seems, and we just need to be aware that, yeah, I mean, it is flat. I'm 100% on that. But there could be people who want us to know, who want lots of people to know. And we should just be aware of that and just look over our shoulders a little bit.
Mark, I thought of the same thing. There could be a reason that somebody is pushing this to lead us down a desired path, for their evil plans. Or on the other hand, in the power structure, there might be people that are like, come on, people, wake up, and they're pushing this because I believe that people waking up to the flat Earth is a way to freedom. It's a way, they no longer control us if we know the Earth is flat, because we'll all want out in some way or form. So that's it could be evil, or it could be good people trying to get us to know. I don't know which one it is.
Yeah, there's a really good quote I read this morning. Flat Earth knowledge is medicine. It is the antidote to the poison we've been drip-fed all our lives. Flat Earth knowledge is a gateway to consciousness. Finally, the truth. Anyone who says the truth doesn't matter definitely hasn't woken up yet. That was a comment on my documentary on IFAs I saw this morning. I think that's quite relevant to what you just said.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think this being a psyop, I don't really buy into that. I think the flat Earth has evolved out of the whole NASA fakery, moon landings, and stuff like that. This has been a secret. It's been hidden for a long time, and I also think there's a spiritual dynamic to this thing. And the internet has enabled us to share information, and the flat Earth, really, people into that. The truth seekers are such a small minority of the population, and so the effect on the bigger population is going to be minimal, I think. And you have people like Barack Obama and other politicians, putting out flat Earth statements. We won't talk to flat earthers. It's all about ridicule. It's all about reinforcing the globe model, and I don't think they want to pull down the system right now. I think they like things the way they are, but I think it's a big spiritual aspect to all of this. And in your recent documentary, Mark, you say that we're waking from amnesia, and I agree with that.
Yeah. One thing I'd say on the psyops thing, one thing that surprises me, I would have, if they really didn't want it to come out, I would expect there to be more shills in there, more leaders of the community with crazy theories. At the moment, we've only got 2 or 3 real big disagreements: the dome, the infinite plane. But I think if it was a thing they really didn't want to come out, they'd have like 10 people in there with 10 really different theories, pulling people all different directions. So that's something that...
Go on, Mark.
That's something that surprises me, how there's not more people in there, sort of people who have big hits on the YouTubes, who are really pulling people different ways. There's only like 2 or 3 different disagreements. I would have thought if they didn't want it to come out, they'd have a lot of agents in there with like 10 or 20 different theories, totally fragmenting the whole movement.
Yeah, well, I think there are paid trolls that definitely troll my videos and lots of flat Earth videos. You can see the same names on all kinds of videos, and they're trying to disrupt it and ridicule it and whatever, put people off. And there's YouTubers like Vsauce, with like 9 million subscribers, mocking the flat Earth and so on. So for me, I don't see it. And also other big names in the truth community, supposed suspicious people, they're all anti-flat Earth as well. So they're not pushing it either. So I think if the authorities wanted to push it, they could co-opt these people, and I think there would be more division. I think what we're seeing right now with the different models is this subject has really been around for the last 6-7 months or what have you, maybe a bit longer, and people are just looking for answers, and they're looking at different theories and different ideas, and if the powers that be might want to step in at some point. And we've also got NASA coming out with these pictures of Earth, which are clearly like CGI animation, Photoshop jobs. And at this time, it's been 43 years since the last blue marble Apollo 17 picture. So they're coming out. They're all trying to reinforce the globe model, I see. So I'm not seeing it as a psyop, really.
Yeah, this is true. NASA really are ramping up their game, aren't they? The last week they've had loads about, we might be finding more life. There's a billion other Earths in our galaxy. They really are. It's almost like every 3 days NASA are doing worldwide news on some more nonsense. As I said, I'm not 100% on this. The whole thing's a psyop. I give it 60-70% and just say it's something we should be aware of.
In the live chat, Stephen Smith says that Yogi guy has weaponized the flat Earth. I'm sorry, I didn't get that one out properly. The live chat, very comical. Thank you, Stephen Smith, he says that the Yoki guy has weaponized flat Earth. Some of you will get that one, some of you won't. I want to throw a question to you, Mark. Is it possible that this flat Earth thing is being used as a guilt by association or discredit by association as a way to cover for NASA fakery? And where I'm going with this is that there's a group called Clues Forum, and they're loosely affiliated with Fakeologists. And one of the ideas that's being floated there is that NASA fakery has only really been getting properly exposed in online forums and YouTube videos and these kinds of things for the last few years. Yet, like Bill Kaysing released his book about man not going to the moon back in the early 1970s, but in terms of using the social media that we have to use today and the Internet 2.0, whatever it's called, YouTube, Facebook, these kinds of things, to expose media fakery, NASA's only really been getting exposed for the last few years. And the idea, or one of the ideas that's been floated, is that NASA's days are numbered, and by associating NASA fakery with the flat Earth, this is a way to sort of cover the problems that NASA are now facing as people wake up to them. Do you think there's any possible truth to this?
I think there's some possible truth, but I think the governments are so heavily invested in NASA that if everyone saw them as nonsense, I'm not sure. I mean, I don't really go hard on an opinion one way or the other until I know for sure. So I'd just give that, like, a good percentage chance. And the NASA fakery has gained tons of traction, you're right, and it wasn't really looked at 4 years ago, but there was still all the information there. I suppose the truth movement, we all sort of like jump on the next hot topic, don't we? I mean, it was like, Sandy Hook, we all jump on that, and then the Boston, we all jump on that, and we're all sort of like, we all jump on the next hottest thing, don't we? And the NASA thing is very hot right now.
Yeah, well, it seems to me as though the so-called truth community, particularly the YouTube truth community, has spent most of the last 3 years focused on Sandy Hook, the Boston bombings, and to a lesser extent things like the Aurora shootings, and then jumping on every new media hoax since then. But all of a sudden, the NASA fakery came to the fore, and then within a couple of months, the flat Earth thing came to the fore. And I suppose the notion is that how do I put this? The suggestion is that NASA fakery was always going to come out eventually, so that what happened was when it did come to the fore, they've attached it to flat Earth theory, if you like, or ball Earth skepticism, as I call it, with the notion being that people will never buy in to the Earth not being a spinning ball. That's a bridge too far. So if all of those of us who are pointing out NASA fakery are also pointing out ball Earth fakery, it'll act as a cover for the NASA fakery coming out, if that makes sense. Are you following the line of logic?
Yeah, that makes much more sense to me. Yeah, I give that a massive high probability, because they can protect themselves that way. They can say, oh, well, if you think NASA's fake, you're one of those crazy flat Earth guys, I mean, I've had some scientist guys I've talked to, and they're like, they think I'm completely crazy for even questioning these sort of satellite photos and planet photos. That's how ingrained it is.
Yeah, well, here's my perspective on this. I'm just asking that because I follow Fakeologists and Clues Forum. I respect their work, especially on NASA fakery. So I thought it was worth pitching that idea to you, because you seem very open-minded to the idea that the flat Earth thing is coming from above rather than organically. I'm open-minded to both possibilities, but it seems to me as though if the flat Earth thing is coming from above, then you can look at the pressure points, and you have to, I mean, basically you have to say that Dubay and or Sargent and or Boyland are the agents acting on behalf of the powers that be, because those are the three who have really popularized it over the last 6 to 10 months. Now, if you don't accept that any of those three are working for the powers that be, then I don't see how people can claim that this is coming from above, because those are the three, in my opinion, that have really popularized this, since Dubay's book late last year, Sargent's video in February, and then, of course, Boyland prior to Dubay. And Dubay used Boyland almost as an appeal to authority, because Boyland supposedly worked for NASA. So it seems to me, if people are going to say that this is all coming from above, you really then have to point the fingers at those three. And for me, even though I can see why some people have question marks about one or two or three of them, I'm not sure that there's a compelling case against any of them. So for me at the moment, I think it's all inferential arguments, and I'm not against them. Me personally, I think it's possible this actually is an organic thing. And let me tell you why. You make a good point when you say that the flat Earth takes your imagination to the gym. This is something that I've heard you say before, that it lets people's imaginations run wild. And I've noticed this. A lot of people seem to have been dormant. Their imagination, their fascination with the world around them has been dormant since they were children, when they start questioning the shape of the ball, all of a sudden, all of their curiosity and their imagination, their fascination comes back to them, and off and away they go, and the world becomes a wonderful thing again. And it seems to me as though those people who can get past the cognitive dissonance of questioning the shape of the ball, it really is an invigorating thing and an infectious thing. And it seems plausible to me that this could be organically catching on amongst alternative thinkers. Do you think that's possible as well?
Yeah, it definitely could be organic. I mean, I'd said I sort of give it a 60-70% it's psyops, and I was just advising any listeners to just look over your shoulder, because these people are kind of smart. They've been orchestrating stuff on this planet, you know, the money, the media, our reality. They've been orchestrating a lot for many, many decades, many centuries. So I think we should be open to the notion that this is something they want to come out. I'm not 100% on that, but I think it's something we should be aware of. And as you said, I don't really know if anyone's a shill. I mean, those three big guys you just mentioned, I've got nothing to say either of them are shill. There was a new video on Matt Boylan this week that was quite interesting. I don't know if you guys saw it, you know, with the 33 jumper and the goat and stuff. I usually get a bit jittery with the guys or girls, the people who aren't doing much output, and the people at the center of trouble, the people at the center of conflicts, and the people who aren't doing much research or much output. They're the people I get a bit jittery with, but not enough to actually call them a shill. But I do get jittery with the people who are online a lot, not doing much output, but are in the center of trouble.
Yeah, I completely get what you're saying. Well, we need to move on to the other topics. Before we do, though, I want to go around the round table. First, we'll go to Dearth and then to Matrix. Any thoughts you want to share about this notion that the flat Earth thing that we're witnessing? I mean, this year, 2015, we're witnessing this takeover alternative news and YouTube channels and what have you on the internet. Dearth, we'll start with you there. You, I'm sure, are open-minded to the possibility that this is coming from above, but also to the possibility that this is just a truly organic thing.
I'm open up to the possibility that it's coming from above. And above, I mean, this could be an angelic, thing where they're helping us wake up to the reality of the world that we live in. That is not out of the realm of possibility. And the reason I think that is the way I came onto it. Nobody, pushed me into this. I felt an urge to it. I'm a little ADD myself, and it's hard for me to sometimes focus on things. When I find a flat Earth video, when I look at the time, the longer it is, the happier I am. I will watch a 5-hour flat Earth video. I saw WaykiWayki's latest video. It's about an hour and a half, I think, last night, and I was thrilled, and I watched it at regular speed because I wanted to soak it all in. And I actually think there's a great possibility that, this is being thrust upon us to wake us out of our slumber now that the veil has been lifted. I believe that happened on December 21st, 2012, and people are waking up faster and faster to all of these things. And this one, which seems the craziest of them all when you look into it, makes the most sense of them all and ties everything together in my book.
Fair enough. Well, Matrix, any thoughts on this topic before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, to me, when we look at the flat Earth, I mean, there seems to be lots and lots of proofs for that we're not on a spinning ball, and it alludes to us being on a flat plane of some kind, whether it's domed or not. But I mean, this whole subject has picked up in the last several months in the Truth Committee, or half a year, what have you, and it's gaining pace. But it's also met a lot of resistance in the truth movement. I mean, there's plenty of people out there who are just willing to write it off, which has been a big surprise for a lot of us, I think. To me, this subject really kind of separates the open-minded people who can consider all kinds of possibilities and willing to question literally everything, even the place that we are. So I think it kind of, I think. If it was a psyop, it hasn't really done, they haven't really succeeded, because there's, lots of truthers who are willing, and, big names out there in the truth movement who aren't willing to go there. So in that sense, it's not been a success. And I see it as an organic thing. I think there's a spiritual dynamic to it all. and an aspect of revelation, if you like. And the times that we're in, I mean, it's really fascinating. So much is coming out right now. So many aspects of the corrupt system are being exposed, and I think that I don't think the system wants that to happen. I think they're doing everything in their power to keep it on the way it's going and been going for a long time. So I don't think it's a psyop at all. I think it's something very much organic, and because of the information age, the internet, and how information spreads so fast. And if you're a truth seeker, you'll pick up on it and you look into this subject and investigate, because there's it really changes everything. It changes where we are, who we are, where we're from. It puts the aspect of a creator into more focus, and it gets us to question everything: science, history, and so on. So, if enough people get into the subject, and it potentially can take the whole system down, and people will be going after the people in power. So I don't think they want that at all. I think they, all the flat Earth stuff, it's been hidden from us. It's all there in the background. It's in the movies. It's in in all kinds of mediums. Religious texts and so on. It's hidden in Freemasonry a bit, and so I think it's just a natural. I don't know whether we call it natural, but something's caused this to happen. This awakening right now, in all aspects of things, and the flat Earth seems to be right near the bottom of the rabbit hole, if you like. So that's my take on it.
Well, if you're just joining us late, this is Ball Earth Skeptic Roundtable episode 10. We've got with us Mark Knight of WaykiWayki. In the live chat, we've got more than 70 live listeners. I want to read out a couple of comments. Honest Trolling says that if they don't want the information getting out, then why are there so many paid agents acting against it? And I want to just quickly touch on that one in a moment. We'll come back to it. A couple other comments. Scotty Storm says that most of our history is written in books with pictures like a kid's book. How much of it is even real? We might touch on that one again later on, because it seems to me as though the flat Earth stuff, the Ball Earth skepticism, as fascinating as it is, if people allow themselves to stop there and not go even further, then are they being caught at one point of a much deeper rabbit hole? We'll touch on that again later. I want to go to you there just quickly, WaykiWayki. We'll move on to the next topic soon, I promise, but I understand, I'm not sure if you want to name names on the air here. People can go back and listen to your interview with Lisa Harrison if they wish to do so, but I understand that there was one semi-prominent member of the truth community, if you want to call it that, who got in touch with you via private message and accused you or had problems with you talking about this topic. Do you want to expand on that, or would you rather keep that off the air?
No, I'm open with that. Max Igan, someone I've liked some of his work. He did a really good transhuman documentary a few years ago when I was studying transhumanism. He was going Benny at me about being a flat earther, calling me a CIA agent, a nutcase. He was really angry. He was like, and he also done this one with one or two other guys. And I was trying to rationalize with him, and he was just frothing at the mouth, which really doesn't seem like him, the way he comes across in his works, very calm and passive and calm and, very soft. But he was an angry dude. He was really not happy. He was saying the flat earthers are derailing the whole truth movement. It's going to mess up everyone. It's going to hurt him and all the rest. We're basically derailing the whole truth movement, he was saying. And then I sent him a couple of links, and he was like insulted that I would even think he would look into it in any way.
It's fascinating, isn't it, that a number of people who have for years now attracted a lot of attention and respect for their work in exposing certain events or certain aspects of our world, they're losing a lot of respect and a lot of fans by refusing to touch this one. And it seems to me that if you're not going to look into this properly and then explain why you believe position A, B, C, D, whatever the case may be, if there's any topics that you refuse to touch after spending years telling people they need to open their minds, there's a prima facie hypocrisy there that I think a lot of people simply won't accept, Mark.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, if there's people on a stage, on a €10 DVD talking about being open to knowledge, being open to new information, and then they get all frisky and insulty and shaky when someone talks about flat Earth, they immediately come across as a bit of a fraud, as a bit of a charlatan. Like, for instance, we could say David Icke stands on stage preaching freedom for £60 a ticket, but then lives in his nice middle-class sort of right-wing area on the Isle of Wight. You can't really go around preaching freedom when you're paying council tax and all your corporate bills. So I'm finding a lot of these guys in the truth movement. I mean, I've been in touch with Michael Zarian over the years, the odd email, and I got in touch with Michael, I don't know, nearly a year ago. I said, Mike, have a look at this. I'm falling into this flat Earth thing. Can you throw me a rope and pull me out? Because I was on the border then of geocentric model and the flat Earth, and he didn't even reply. He hasn't spoken to me since. I know for a fact some people have approached Graham Hancock in a very professional way, a very polite way. He didn't even reply. I know Brian Cox, the sort of BBC scientist, I talked about him in my documentary. People have approached him for a debate. He's not interested. So these people, we can start to call them gatekeepers almost. If they're not willing to look at something, then that's quite dangerous. And I think we should be going for someone like Nassim Haramein and get an online debate with him, because he's got a lot of sort of new age truth movement followers. He's kind of like, he's halfway between the truth movement and the science world. He's like a bridge. And if someone like him came on board with the flat Earth movement, then things would go pretty crazy pretty quick. But what you'll find with these people, they don't like to admit they're wrong. People don't like to admit they're wrong, especially the sort of male ego. It takes a lot to say you were wrong, and people are selling DVDs, selling seats at lectures, and they've got a whole image. People don't really like to say, oh, by the way, the past 10 years, all that work I did was wrong. I'm sorry. So that's a hurdle I don't see us coming across jumping over pretty soon.
Yeah, my position is I'll respect anybody who can give valid reasons as to why they believe in the Copernican heliocentric spinning ball model. What I can't respect is people who say that this topic isn't important, which amazingly many people are, including some of these prominent or semi-prominent leading truth movement figures. To say that this topic isn't important seems to me to be almost more absurd than the spinning ball model itself. And one of the things I like about your work, Mark, is that you point out this isn't just about the fact that we've been lied to about the shape of the Earth. It's about once you realize that we've been lied to about the shape of the Earth, the way that it can change us internally. And one of the things that I find so uplifting is reading the comments of people in our live chat and underneath the videos that we do, where people say that what they've learned about the lies of the spinning ball, while it was hard at first, it has since had such a positive impact on them. I think people who watch your videos, they'll come away with a more positive understanding of who they are, the world that they're in, because once you get rid of the lies, you do see there's something very special on this earth, and by teaching us these spinning ball lies, they take it away from us. We will move on to the next topic in just a moment. Just quickly, Nathan Ramos in the live chat says that he thinks the reason why the flat earth is getting so big is because deep down, we all know something is wrong with the spinning ball theory. And Grizz Frank says that he thinks the reason why this is all coming out now is because the powers that be are confident that the masses are too dumbed down to even realize they've been lied to. Interesting thoughts. Keep the live comments coming, people. We enjoy them. We're going to move on to the next topic today. And again, the rest of the rundown is we're going to talk about the recent book that Mark's released. We're going to talk about the Tunguska smoking gun, to use his terminology, different models of the flat earth, and if we get time, ancient mythology, which I've got some questions for you about, Mark, and then also the debate between Art Bell and the Morgile at the end of the show. So please stick around. Been a good show so far. The next topic is to do with the book that you've released recently, Mark. Now, this is a free ebook that people can access from your site. It's entitled The Moon, Function and Cataclysm. For the benefit of those who haven't read your book yet, do you want to give us a basic rundown of what's inside?
Yeah, it's like a 100-page ebook, lots of pictures to pad it out. No, I'm joking. Basically, what I saw in the flat earth community was a lot of agreement. This is a few months ago now, but I saw a lot of discrepancy about the moon. Everyone was sort of leaving it, and the people who were looking at it were still unsure. I was unsure. I disagree with a few things that another guy in the flat earth community was doing. I think that a lot of people were pinning on to what he was doing, and I sort of disagreed. I got kicked off a forum for disagreeing. You can guess for yourselves what forum that might be. And so I decided to look at the moon at ring fence. So I did like a 2-month study of the moon from a flat earth perspective and drew a line in the sand. And in the book, we look at, is it flat or spherical, proof that it lights itself, which I firmly believe, how the moon helps prove we're on a flat Earth. It also looks at some other notions like the lunar eclipse and the solar eclipse. So it sort of ring fences the whole moon on its own. I thought this needed to be done. The latter chapters are conjecture and look at the possible notion that the moon is an old malfunctioning sun, which sounds crazy at the first listen. But if we go back to that blank canvas we talked about earlier, where we get rid of everything we were taught from NASA and the schools, this becomes a little bit more plausible. So it covers a whole host of subjects. And it's also, if someone's new to the flat Earth movement or still on the fence, ball or flat, this book can still walk someone through it. It's not just for people who are just solely on the flat. This book can be given to a 10-year-old in the street because it starts off very simple and walks one through it.
Well, I read the book today, actually, Mark, because we were having you on the show, and there was one section that stood out to me more than others. That's Chapter 6, Disinformation. Let me read out a quick quote from the book. Quote, "The moon has more crazy theories bandied about than almost any other subject in our reality. Here is a quick list and a quick debunk so we can move on. Point 1, lunar waves proving it's a hologram. This is from digital cameras refreshing. Point 2, it's a projection. From where and what? Point 3, it's a hologram. Then how can its light affect plants, chemicals, animals, and people?" End quote. And there's another 5 or 6 dot points there as well. So you spend an entire chapter debunking what you think are some of the bad models of the moon. Now, this would put you at odds with some of the leading YouTubers who cover flat Earth and especially who cover the moon and lunar waves and these kinds of things. So do you want to expand on any of those dot points for the listeners?
I can't really see how it can be a hologram because it's massive conjecture. Where's it projected from, for one? And two, how would it affect us so much as it does? I mean, as I say, I think in that subject, if you do like a meditation or a ceremony or something like this on the new moon or the full moon, there's a massive difference in energy and frequency. Also, plants get affected by the moon. Animals get affected by the moon. If it was a hologram, this would be some super intelligent hologram. I can't think of all the points in that chapter off the top of my head because I've done so much work since then.
No, I fully understand. I guess a lot of people are big fans of a gentleman named Crow777. Now, I've watched a number of Crow's videos and I've listened to him on podcasts. I think that he's a very well-spoken individual. And when he speaks about some of the problems to do with NASA or with the shape of the Earth, I think he speaks really well. But he really made his name by capturing what he calls lunar waves. And I noticed that was the first dot point in your chapter, and you entitled it Disinformation. So you probably don't want to, get into a slinging match with other people. But would you say that people who are pushing the idea of lunar waves are pushing disinformation? Is it possible that they're just pushing misinformation? That is, that they believe what they're saying, they're just misguided, in your opinion?
Yes, I would say it's more misinformation or an opinion that I don't share. I spoke to a few people about this and sent these videos to a few people, and I thought it was sort of a refresh rate on a digital camera, and these people agreed with me and said, yeah, that's 100% a refresh issue, because it can't be repeated all the time. I mean, this refresh thing, if you take it with a different camera, it doesn't do it. I think it's to do with the camera. I'm pretty sure of this. And even I just see it as massive wild conjecture. I just don't see enough evidence.
Yeah, I understand. And again, I want to make this clear. I find Crow to be a well-spoken gentleman. I'd love to have him on this show or another one to chat with him myself on the air or off the air. I don't have any personal grievances with him. My position, though, on the lunar waves theory is that it does seem hard to replicate, and it could so easily be made up. Now, I'm not saying that Crow is making this up, but to me, this isn't compelling evidence, and it seems like it's attracting a lot of attention away from other methods that can more easily be used to debunk the Copernican model. That's my position. I'll go to you there, Dirth. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I don't necessarily believe what Crow is representing out there. He does move the camera around, which kind of explains away the refresh rate on the camera, but he is the only one that I've seen that's come up with it, so it could be completely made up. But when he says the moon is a hologram. I don't think that's his exact quote. I think his quote is that perhaps there's some hologram projected on whatever the moon is so we can't see what it really is. And that I can't rule out, but it's pure conjecture. There's no way yet to prove it. But perhaps, the moon affects our the way we feel. It protects it affects our reproduction cycle. It affects our behavior. Maybe the moon is something way beyond what I'm imagining or can even think it is, and perhaps they need some sort of disguise over it, some sort of projection or hologram, because I don't have a better word for whatever it is. I don't know.
Matrix, anything you want to add to this discussion?
But yeah, I mean, there's lots to wonder about the moon these days. I mean, it's become a mystery again, hasn't it? I mean, for a lot of us who are questioning the Borg model, the mainstream science version of where we are. I mean, like with the sun and the stars, the galaxy. I mean, Mark covers various different points about the moon in his book. I mean, it's I've scanned through it a bit and. And watch some of his videos on the subject where he deals with the phases and that. I mean, I was wondering what Mark's thoughts are about whether it's a disc or a sphere or what he thinks it is and why.
I think it's flat, and I think it's face down, which creates another problem, which I wrote in the book, the ellipse problem. I had a bit of a argument about on IFAs. I think all those comments were deleted or something. But yeah, it has to be flat for reasons I put in the book, I believe. It's my opinion. And I believe it has to be face down. I mean, that creates an issue where it rises and where it sets. But I've put some possible reasons why that could be in there. But I really don't think it's a sphere.
Is that due to that there not being any diffused shading on the moon? If the light was being projected on it, there'd be a hot spot and so on. Or can you elaborate a bit on why you think it's
mainly the hot spot, mainly the way it distributes light. Also because people in different parts of the Earth see the same face. I mean, if it was a sphere or not a disk, people in different parts of the Earth, even if it's flat Earth, which it is, people would see different parts of it. So think of the flat Earth. Someone in, say, Europe and someone in, say, South Africa. They're on the same timeline. So as the moon goes past in between those people, so the guy in Cape Town and the guy in Helsinki, they both look at the moon at the same time. It's in between them. If it was a sphere, they would both see different parts of it. The fact that they don't, for me, paints towards the picture that it's a disc.
Right. Yeah. I think Eric Debate kind of takes that point of view as well. I mean, personally, I've been this has got me to look at the moon a lot, video the moon, photograph the moon, and seeing how it rotates in the sky, seeing how it rises and sets, and I've seen some distortions in the shape of the moon. Leaning towards the possibility of like the ellipse idea to some extent.
It's a really mystical beast for sure.
So I have a comment that, just like a television, a flat screen television, when it projects a picture on the television, like if somebody's on the television pointing at the camera, no matter where you stand, on the far left of the room, on the far right of the room, or in the middle, that person is pointing towards you. So that can explain how a flat disk, no matter where you are, it looks the same. So if that's the case, maybe there is some sort of projection coming off the moon, whatever it is.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, Dave. I mean, definitely. I mean, it's curious how that happens. That effect happens. I mean, I think Mark mentioned in his recent documentary about there's the idea that there's different models and different approaches to the flat Earth, and I think one of them was to do with dimensions. And personally, I'm open to the idea that the moon could be popping in, and the sun and whatever we're seeing in the sky could be dimension related. Whether it's some coming in from a fourth dimension, fifth dimension, what we're seeing there, is not what we've been told it is by NASA. it's not whether it's terra firma, whether it's something physical or not. I'm not sure. I wonder what Mark's take on that is.
Does it appear that we've lost Mark once again?
Yeah.
He's
I'll
on
say to
mute.
listeners who are just joining us late that Mark is coming to us live from Spain, and they're having some technical issues over there to do with the heat wave that they're apparently suffering through. So Mark will probably join us again shortly. While we're waiting for him to do that, we had a number of topics that we wanted to touch on tonight, lads, and so far we've gotten through the introduction for Mark, the awakening of the flat Earth, and at the moment we're currently discussing his moon book. It's entitled The Moon, Function and Cataclysm, and people can pick this up for free. He's put together a downloadable PDF that doesn't cost a cent, and I think one of the most amazing things about this flat Earth phenomenon that's taken over the internet is that while there are some people who are making money off their work, and I'm not here to say whether that's good or bad, there's a number of people who are doing their research and putting it out there for people to consume and not charging a cent. And our guest tonight, Mark Knight of WaykiWayki, is one of them. Now, Mark, have you managed to rejoin us? It looks as though his login avatar is there, but he still can't hear us. So, Mark, when you do manage to hear us, just yell out and we'll throw back to you. But in the meantime, still functioning on this moon aspect matrix, I've gone out and filmed the moon a couple of times now. I've done my moon experiment, and I've said on there a few times that it was only through all of this kind of research and inquiry that got me re-fascinated with the moon. And I'm at the point now where I can't help but stare at it whenever I'm out there. And this is one of the things we've touched on a lot on this show, is that whether or not your research leads you to conclude that the Earth is flat or concave or a spinning ball, if you do find the evidence to prove that, one of the things that this kind of research will do is help you re-find fascination with the world around you. And I understand that this has been your experience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's made me question everything what I'm seeing in the sky. I mean, I love looking up at the sky now and wondering what it really is. I mean, last night I spent like about half an hour, 45 minutes looking up to see the Perseids meteor showers, and I had the Milky Way, what Mark calls the dark rift, above me, and I was watching the stars, and I felt so still. I didn't feel like I was spinning at 800 miles an hour at my location, and so yeah, I mean it's just fascinating. It's given me this whole new. I was looking at the stars, wondering what they are. What is it? What am I looking at up there? So this whole subject has got me looking into it and trying to document it and verify it. And people come up with different ideas, and there's different theories, and it's just a case of like working out ironing out the creases kind of thing, and to come to what evidence is the strongest and so on. So.
Well, I think that Mark has managed to make it back into the hangout. Just quickly in the live chat, Robo Spirit says that apparently in a recent interview, Crow 777 is now saying that he doesn't use the word hologram to describe the moon. I should say that regardless of whether I agree with his views on lunar wave or not, one of the good things that Crow has done, he put together a video explaining the way that the lasers being shot to the moon to prove that we went to the moon. He did a video exposing that complete and utter scam for what it is. And this is why I always say, no matter what any person on this panel or other shows say about this particular YouTuber or that particular YouTuber, it's always in the best interest of the listeners to go and check out this material for themselves and come to their own conclusions. And Mark, are you back in the hangout with us right now?
Yep, I'm good. I've been here a while listening.
Excellent. In your book, The Moon, Function and Cataclysm, you touch upon this idea or this notion that perhaps the moon that we have right now is an ancient sun, and that we're not far away from a cataclysm. In fact, that's one of the words that you use in the book. And when you were discussing this with Lisa on her show back in July, she sort of questioned you as to whether maybe this is a little bit on the fear porn side or the scary side. Do you want to elaborate on this idea that you think that maybe we are on the verge of a cataclysm?
I wouldn't really put it like that, but this is a really crazy notion off the bat. But what I did in December last year, I did a very long article looking at the Milky Way, because I was like, okay, we need to look at this stuff again from the flat Earth model. And I went all around the ancient world, and I mean, I lived with the Maya in a village for a couple of years in Guatemala, so I know about the Maya and their myths. And I went all around the world looking at the Aborigines, the Maya, the ancient Vedic people, all around the world. And they've all got mythology about what we call the Milky Way. And they never called it the Milky Way. They called it the Cosmic Mother, the Dark Rift, the Road to the Underworld. They had all these other names for it. And obviously with the flat Earth model, the stars are a lot closer than what we've been told. They're probably like between 3 and 10,000 miles away. I can't clarify that, but that's what I feel. They're obviously not light years away. I can't see that as being true. And what all these myths said all around the world is, and in this article in December, I just shared what these myths said. It wasn't like it was my opinion. I was sharing these myths. What all these myths said is that this dark rift opens, or something comes out and changes the mechanics or the current state of the night sky, or the sky. And what do I mean by that? Well, some myths would say a new sun came out, such as the Aztec and the Maya. Even a Japanese religious sect, they believe this. Some myths say a moon came out or a new sun. Some of them said a big sort of cataclysmic destroyer came out. This is from the Kolbrin. Some myths said a flood came out. So there are myths all around the ancient world talking about this dark rift. And I started looking into this, and I pieced it all together in a presentable format and put it on my website last December, pointing towards the fact that it's highly possible this dark rift is linked to a cataclysm. And cataclysm has happened before on this planet, as a lot of people know. But what I also found is that, I've studied cataclysm before with Velikovsky's work, Graham Hancock's work, and some other people's work. There's not many people in the flat Earth community who've looked at cataclysm before, and can't really look at it from a flat Earth perspective. So I felt this was something I should do, because I knew about the flat Earth and I knew about cataclysm. So I started digging. And what I come up with in the Moon book was it's highly possible that the Moon is an old malfunctioning sun. If, it's a big if we believe these old myths that are the same all around the world. So if we just let go of what we've learned before, the Moon is pretty much the same size as the Sun. The Moon travels in pretty much the same trajectory as the Sun. I think it's like a 5% difference. And it crosses the Sun's trajectory twice a month, which we call the lunar nodes. In the book, I explain them as FE nodes, flat Earth nodes, just to re-describe them. So the Moon's the same distance away. It's the same size. It travels in pretty much the same trajectory. And it travels a bit slower, like it's lost its power. So I was looking at the concept theory that the Moon could possibly be an old malfunctioning sun. But to listeners who haven't seen my other work, this will be pretty crazy off the bat. But there's a very long article last December looking at the myths, and there's another documentary I did called Flat Earth, Dark Rift, Dome, Myth and Cataclysm, that they can look at to get some more background to this sort of mythological statement that I'm making.
Well, what we'll do is we'll use this as a segue into a topic that was meant to come later in the show, but we might as well get right into it now, and that's to do with ancient mythology. Now, you've spent a lot of your time, I think even before the Flat Earth research, Mark, looking at ancient mythology and seeing what you can glean from their teachings. Do you want to expand further on some of the things that you use from what you've read about ancient teachings, mystical teachings, and how it relates to your current Flat Earth model?
Well, what I've realized years ago with studying esoterica is that myth and pantheon are definitely like vehicles. It's to hold a truth alive for humanity for centuries. Like in today's sort of very rational, logical world, people say, oh, it's an ancient myth. That's nonsense. They were idiots. That's not really true. Myth is like a vehicle that's timeless, and a story usually has some truth behind it. And they use the story to keep the truth alive. Like if you just write on some sheepskin or on a stone tablet, this happened and it sucked. It's not going to hold any weight. But if these people create a beautiful story, it gets changed, it gets copied, it gets repeated, and it keeps something alive. It keeps the story alive. So myths are something I feel that we should really look at with some very sensible ears and sensible eyes. Whereas a lot of people in today's world think they're all nonsense. And what I found with this dark rift stroke two suns, there was times where there was no moon, a time when there was two moons, stars fell from the sky. I've laid out all these myths, and what I found is in different places on the Earth, they say the same thing, but in a different story, with different archetypes. So the myth holds the same story, but the vehicle of the myth is a little bit different. And I've studied myths before through the Kabbalah, shall we say, because there's a lot of myth and pantheon attached to the Kabbalistic Sephiroth. So I hold myth in high regard, and I look at myth very sensibly. I don't look at it as being rubbish. So from the flat Earth perspective, I felt like duty bound almost to have a look at these ancient myths from a flat Earth perspective. Because if we look at the myths for the Dark Rift, the Milky Way, as being like, what, trillions and trillions of miles away, they don't mean anything. It's just like, oh, it's ancient idiots. But if this Dark Rift is like a few thousand miles away, these myths start to carry a lot more weight.
Well, I want to make the point to the listeners. What we've done over the first 9 episodes of this show, Mark, is we've spent most of our time looking at some of the problems with the Ball Earth model, and I think it's worked out well. You're the guest for our 10th and final guest-based episode for the season, and tonight we're spending a little bit more time speculating about some of the other models, and in particular Moon, because that's one of the things that you focus on. And what I found over the course of doing this show is that even though I'm quite happy to say that I don't know what Earth I'm standing on, I don't know what the Moon is, I don't know what the Sun is, I do know that the model that I was given at school is based on zero evidence whatsoever and is largely internally inconsistent. For me, I'm happy with that. I found that with a lot of other people, they seem to need to replace the false heliocentric Copernican understanding with something else. And one of the things that you said in one of your videos resonated with me, which was this idea that the flat Earth theorizing or the Ball Earth debunking, it puts your imagination, it puts it through the gym, it gives it the chance to revitalize itself. And so even though I don't particularly get myself involved in the speculations about other models and about what the Moon is, I can see why that's valuable for other people, and I know that it's valuable for you as well. So I'm more than happy for you to share your ideas with the listeners tonight. I have got a couple of questions for you about the mythology, which I'll throw to you in a moment, but first we'll go around the round table. We've got with us Dirth there live from New York. Dirth, anything you want to add, any questions you want to ask about this idea that ancient mythology can be instructive about the Earth that we stand on today?
I've always pointed out that the ancient, civilizations had much more knowledge of astronomy, the ability to build pyramids, megalithic structures. They knew about ley lines. They know so much more than we do today, and they also knew the Earth was flat. So, why are we taking that away from them? They discovered, planets and stars that we only recently discovered. I just think the knowledge, we've been dumbed down and the knowledge has been taken from us to enslave us.
Fair enough. Matrix, anything that you wanted to add to this? Have you spent much time yourself looking into ancient mythology? Do you find it instructive when discussing the ball or the flat Earth today?
Yeah, I think I've spent quite a lot of time looking into ancient cultures as well, and the mysteries and so on, and the esoteric, as Mark says. I think there's a lot of demonization of religion and these ancient beliefs that we've been subjected to via the television and propaganda and this whole Ball Earth model. The whole version of science. That's sprouted up over the last since Copernicus, really. I mean, you can go back to the Greeks and Eratosthenes and various people questioning what the shape is and what this place is. I think there's a lot to be learned there from looking at those old texts and old beliefs, and the assumption that we're more advanced now because we have some kinds of technology is a myth. I think it's an illusion, perpetuated by the mainstream to convince us that we should disregard all these old stories and metaphors, allegories, and so on, and mysteries. So I think there's this flat Earth investigation really gets us looking back towards these things, pre this whole modern science idea, materialistic view of the universe, the Big Bang and evolution and so on, which to me are myths, provable myths. They're fantasies, they are theories, and have created this whole new religion itself of scientism, and we've discussed this quite a bit. So yeah, I think it's well worth looking at those things. If you're a truth seeker, you've got to look at all kinds of subject matters, and where we came from is a big part of it. It's related to where we are and who we are. I'd like to ask Mark about, when he comes back, he's just dropped out right now, but about the Kabbalah and Mark, are you there?
When he comes back, it usually takes him a minute or two to hear us, so we'll let him just get that sorted out. In the live chat, Brap Allgood says that Velikovsky is essential reading. We've got more than 80 people watching live, so Brap, thanks for the comment. Keep the comments coming. And yeah, Matrix, do you get what I'm saying? I mean, I've kind of changed my position on this over the course of doing this show. I started off saying I just want to focus on the problems with the spinning ball model. There are so many of them. People need to understand them. But over the course of the previous 9 weeks, I think we have debunked so many aspects of the spinning ball that at this point, no one who's been following us from the start could possibly still believe in the spinning ball unless they were probably destined to always believe in the spinning ball, in which case, why are they even listening to the show? And by having Mark on for episode 10, it's worked out really well. He does spend a lot of time speculating about other models and using what he's learned from the studies that he's done into mysticism and ancient mythology and these things. So I personally don't see any harm in the speculation, so long as people understand that it's coming from the position of having already debunked the spinning ball. And a lot of the questions that I've asked Mark tonight have almost been follow-ons to the conversations that he had with Lisa Harrison on a podcast that she did with Mark perhaps a month ago now. So what I'll do is I'll link to that interview underneath this show on YouTube in the info box. So for those who are listening to this refresh, they can go back and listen to that one to get the background context. But the point that I'm trying to make here is, even though I don't personally get involved in the speculation about what we're on, because to me I'm more focused on just debunking the spinning ball, I can see the value that this holds for other people to replace the previous mythologies, possibly with new understandings of the earth on which we stand. I hope, Mark, that the points that I'm making, I hope they're not coming across condescending or the wrong way. Do you get where I'm coming from with all of this? Mark's avatar is in the Hangout. He might be able to hear us in a moment. While we're waiting there, Dirth, you get what I'm saying here. I have kind of changed my position on what we should focus on this show over the course of the season. I think that's a natural progression. Do you get what I'm saying here when I say that I don't personally buy into the speculation, but I can see that for many people there is value in exploring some of these ideas?
Yeah, you like to stick to the facts, but you have to come up, in my opinion is, you have to come up with some ideas that are speculation and then try to prove them right or wrong, and you come up with an idea and then you realize, all right, that's ridiculous, and you toss it out. But you come up with an idea and say, okay, well, I haven't been able to rule it out yet, and that leads you to new realizations. Without looking into possibilities, it's hard to find your way out of the box.
Yeah, I fully understand that. I guess my concern is almost, it's the same as if someone's been with the one partner for 5 years and then there's a sudden breakup and they suddenly find themselves with a new partner. They kind of need someone in their life. I think it can be the same with mythologies or worldviews. It's almost like people have had the spinning ball model for 20, 30, 40 years. Do they necessarily want to jump from that belief system to a whole new belief system without a bit of time in between, just really thinking about, well, what do I actually know about what's around me? And for me, the process of going from being a spinning ball earther to understanding that the Copernican model that we were taught is nonsense, it's not something that can happen overnight. It does take weeks, if not months, if not even years of genuine contemplation and reflection. And I would just hope that people, as they're starting to dismantle the ball model in their minds, they do that thoroughly and properly before they start emotionally investing in other models. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. John, you say all the time that you are not a flat earther, but I think that's changed. I think you're secretly a 100% flat earther.
Well, now you're just shit-staring me, Dirth, and that's one of the things I like about you. You've got a nice sense of humour. I think we've been rejoined by Mark. Mark, can you hear us?
Yep, I can hear you guys.
Mate, while you were just getting your connection sorted out there, we were talking about the use or otherwise of this kind of line of inquiry of talking about, well, if we're not on a spinning ball, then where exactly are we? I hope you can get where I'm coming from here. I'm not trying to be condescending towards those people who spend time looking into mythology about what the moon or sun might be. I'm simply trying to make it clear to the listeners that for me, this is speculation that has its own use, especially for people who want to think about where they are to replace their old model. But for me personally, I'm more focused on just debunking the spinning ball. We haven't lost him again, have we?
You're muted if you're still there, Mark. Yeah, he said it's wobbly. He's back, but he's having issues.
I will just say again, for anyone who's joining us late, Mark is coming to us live from Spain. They're having some technical difficulties, so we do apologise for the audio quality tonight. While we wait for Mark to get himself sorted out, I'll just recap. Tonight we've gone through an introduction to Mark Knight of WaykiWayki. We spent some time talking about the awakening of the flat Earth and the fact that this has just swept the internet over the last 6 to 12 months. We spent some time talking about the book that he released for free in PDF called The Moon, Function and Cataclysm, and we spent the last little while talking about ancient mythology. We've got a couple more topics that we want to touch on, but I'll throw to you first there, Dirth. Any comments or questions that you want to get into before we move on?
No, I'm ready to move on. Maybe while we're waiting for him to connect, we could jump to a subject that it doesn't involve his forte, you know.
You want to talk about the Morgile on Art Bell? I
think at some point we should. This is a better spot than any since he's not unable to connect. And he's
That's
back.
fine by me, mate. Well, I'll throw to you. You can get the ball rolling.
So I'm gonna keep it quick. You know, for those of you, most of you are aware that there was a spot on the Art Bell show, Midnight in the Desert, and in a nutshell, it was supposed to be John and myself and Eric Dubay. And during all of the planning for this, there was their producer, a guy by the name of Dr. J, was very, very difficult to work with. And Eric backed out. Last week I mentioned that Eric's backing out at the last minute was very suspicious, but after speaking with Eric, he pointed out that this guy just drove him crazy, and he said, listen, if you want to do the show without me, go ahead. And Dr. J took the lead and said, okay, we'll get somebody else. And that somebody else was supposed to be me or possibly John Laban, but a whole comedy of errors. I was away on vacation. I had no cell service. They're pinging me, and I said, here, the Morgile will do a great job, and I had his phone number, and I passed it on to them via text message. So the Morgile went on. He was Art Bell and the scientist, whatever his name was, they double-teamed him. They took his 20 questions and picked out just the questions that they wanted to deal with. They turned his volume down, and under the pressure, and him trying to be polite, you know, letting them interrupt him every time he started to get a point out, he was unable to get any information out, and it got very confrontational, and it just didn't go well at all. The Morgile has excellent videos. He does some excellent work, and that's why we had him on the show. If you go back, I believe it was 1 or 2 episodes ago or 3 episodes ago that we had him on. It was a fantastic show. Everybody loved it. So that's the whole story there. John, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, well, I've got a video that I plan to release in the next day or two touching on some of this, but just basically Art Bell's people did get in touch with me and they discussed the possibility of me going on the show. Originally, like you said, David, it was pitched to me as myself, you, and Eric Dubay going on the show for a general discussion. That then became a debate. And the person that I was speaking with from Art Bell's team, if I can call it that, had canvassed with me the idea of debating a scientist, an expert. He said, would you be confident in doing that? I said, absolutely, I would. I'd love to do it. And then he said to me that he had Eric Dubay as a potential lineup as well. I said, well, you're better off going with Dubay because he's written a book on the topic of flat Earth. He's a well-spoken guy. I think he would do a better job than me. He's been looking into this for longer than me. And he said, I appreciate your honesty. We'll go with... well, he was going to go with Dubay anyway, but he appreciated my support with going with Dubay. He said, if we have any problems with Dubay, would you be happy to be our backup option? Because that when they were organising these shows, they do connection tests before the show and all these kinds of things. And at the time, they were struggling to get through to Eric. So he said, if we can't get Eric to go through the process to get him on the show, would you be happy to be a backup? I said, sure, no problem at all. I'll help you however I can. Let's just get as many people as we can, especially good speakers like Eric on these kinds of shows. Anything I can do to support you, I'll do that. And I also said to him, by the way, if there was any problems with getting me on as a backup, you should have David on because I think David would kill a professor or an expert as well. So between Eric, David, or myself, I'm sure we're going to make a mess of whatever professor you put up on the show. So this gentleman who I spoke with was cool with all of that. That was the last I heard until you promoted the fact that Morgile was going on the show the next day on Art Bell, which was fine by me as well because we'd had Morgile on our show. He'd been a terrific guest. Like you said, most people liked having him on board. So I was looking forward to tuning into the show the next day. I think you've summarised pretty well what happened on the show with Art Bell, and the rest is history. But I have heard a few people asking, well, how did the whole thing happen to go down like that? Apparently they didn't contact Mark Sargent. I think there's a good reason why they wouldn't want to contact Mark Sargent. He speaks too well. He's too likable. The last thing you want to do is put him into a trap. I don't think it would work out well. It seems to me as though the strategy might have been to get on a lovely, but perhaps in this case slightly naive speaker like Morgile, who was just too nice and wasn't ready for that kind of attack, and try to make him look bad. But in the end, I think all they managed to do was to show just how little evidence they've got for the spinning ball, that their strategy to make flat earthers look bad is to invite someone on the show who thinks he's going on there for a genuine debate and then ambush him in the way that they did. So even though I feel for Morgile, and it must have been a terrible experience to go on there under the misapprehension that you were going to be treated fairly, I think for those of us who can look at things objectively, none of us are thinking bad things about Morgile. We support him. Hopefully he gets another chance with somebody else in the future. And in the meantime, I think even though it's unfortunate that he had to go through that experience, all it's done is solidify in my mind, and I think in many people's minds, the fact that these so-called experts, these Harvard professors or whatever, if they have to resort to appeal to emotion, appeal to authority, all of these logical fallacies, but not provide any actual evidence, all that's done is made us more confident that these people are frauds, and that particular so-called professor, I don't think he'll ever listen to this show or this will ever get back to him, but if it ever does, I would be more than happy to have a conversation with him at any point in the future, and I'd be more than happy to moderate a real debate between him and Morgile, because I think if you gave Morgile a chance to chat with that guy in a proper, well-moderated debate, Morgile would make a mess of him. He was just lucky that he had Art Bell there pushing the moon landings, and I mean, that's the sad reality here. Art Bell is still pushing that men actually landed on the moon. I mean,
what's amazing is the night before, the night before, Art Bell had Jay Widener on, who destroyed Whitley Strieber, or I forget who he had on. Destroyed one of the guys that's big about the moon landing. He just explained away, how Stanley Kubrick filmed the whole thing and it was all fake, and he didn't even mention that. When Morgile mentioned that the moon landings were fake, he didn't even bring up yesterday's show. And every time Morgile started to get a point out, they turned his volume down and spoke right over him. It was a complete, utter sabotaged interview from Morgile.
Yeah, and look, I've heard people say that Morgile should have been more prepared. He should have had a defensive strategy, knowing that he was going to be put on the defensive. And I agree. He probably, if he had have just read the Wikipedia page on Art Bell, it might have become clear to him that he wasn't going to get a fair debate. So in that sense, I can understand the criticism of Morgile, but at the same time, clearly whoever invited him on the show did so in such a fashion that Morgile thought he was going on to a fair debate and just didn't come prepared for what was going to happen to him. So on the one hand, I can understand the criticisms of Morgile not being prepared for what was inevitable. To me, it was pretty clear what they were going to do. At the same time, though, you can't blame someone like Morgile, who came across to me as a gentleman and a lovely person to speak to. You can't blame him, for going on there and not being prepared for an ambush. And that's the thing. People like myself, people like Morgile, people like Matrix, we're just regular people who do these kinds of shows as a hobby and as an interest, and hopefully our listeners enjoy it, but we're not professionals. So you just put a regular person who happens to be interested in this kind of thing onto a show with a professional host who's been doing this for, 20, 30 years, whatever, and a Harvard-paid, what is he, an astronomer? I mean, he's a fraud. It's a completely fraudulent line of, academia, whatever you want to call it, right? So you put him in an environment where he's up with a professional host, a paid NASA liar. I mean, it's not going to work out well for your average regular amateur like we are if you're not prepared, and that's exactly what happened. So I hope I'm getting my views across well enough. I'm not trying to offend anyone. I'm just being honest in my views. Matrix, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think what happened was just really exposed Art Bell as a gatekeeper. He's someone who's so invested his whole career in talking about aliens, like so many of these, people in the truth movement or conspiracy world, and it was horrible to listen to the way that they went after Morgile, and Morgile is a cool guy. I thought he brought out some good points, but they kept closing him down, and it was just an illustration of the gatekeeping that exists, and these, to me, it's very suspicious about what their motives are there. I mean, they're definitely pushing the whole NASA meme, the moon landings were real, and so on. I mean, the scientists had nothing really. It was just the basic, problematic arguments that they bring up. The Eratosthenes experiment, and they literally had no proof. I mean, and I think he's an astrophysicist at Harvard, and he's just another one of the victims of indoctrination. This scientist, and like so many people regarding the whole ball Earth model. So I think it just really exposed them as gatekeepers, and how anyone could listen to that and not see how unfair the debate was. It was a shame that it went down that way, but good on Morgile for giving it a go.
Oh yeah, good on him for giving it a go, and I think from what I've seen, most people who've commented on the Morgile's re-upload of what took place, they've been supportive of Morgile, and I'm so glad to see that, because even though many of us have never met each other in real life, I think a lot of us feel as though, I don't want to use the word community because that word gets overused, but we feel as though, hey, we're all in this together, and the Morgile went up there, he tried to do his best, he was ambushed, and I don't think any less of him for that. And at the same time, you look at Art Bell's Wikipedia page. I mean, this is a man who gets angry at listeners for questioning the official story of 9/11. So, I mean, anyone who takes that guy seriously as any kind of genuine researcher or any kind of truth seeker or a truth provider, I mean, who are his listeners? People in their mid-50s who still believe in ancient aliens. Unfortunately, it looks as though the ancient aliens crowd have dealt a blow to the flat Earth movement, and hey, good luck to him, and good luck to Art Bell and his mate Josh Finlay, and they've exposed themselves, and I think we haven't heard the last of those two. I'll leave it at that. Dirth, any final comments before we move on?
Final comment is that I believe that Art Bell and Josh, or whatever his name was, both went to Harvard, so they're Harvard grads. Art was sucking up to him, hey, we want you back on. You can talk about black holes and and all sorts of phenomena in the universe. So Art was sucking up to him to make him come back on the show. I reached out to the scientist and via email and Skype and invited him on this show or any show. Or an offline interview with John and Matrix and myself, and he didn't respond. So,
no, of course not. I'll tell you what. Since we've got our guest back with us, Mark, if you can hear us, do you have any comments that you'd like to make about the Art Bell Morgile debate? Did you manage to hear it? What did you think?
I don't really know what you're talking about, to be honest. I heard a little talk about ancient aliens, and I think that's probably been blown out of the water, hasn't it? But no, I don't really know what you're talking about, to be honest. But it sounds quite interesting.
Oh, it was fascinating. Well, we've already come up close towards the 2 hours. Now, if you're able to stick around, we might go a little bit over time because we have had the technical difficulties. So, Mark, do you want to go a little bit over the 2 hour regulated slot?
Yeah, sure. As long as this this Wi-Fi holds out in this place I'm in, I'm happy to carry on.
Excellent. So we'll move on to the next topic. If you're joining us late, we've got Mark Knight of WaykiWayki.com. We've covered a few topics tonight. We might not get time to cover all of them. The next one that I wanted to touch on briefly was the Tunguska smoking gun. So, Mark, can you give us a basic background to this event and why you think it's so significant to the Flat Earth research?
In 1908, there was an event in sort of Russia, Siberia, and it was sort of the middle of nowhere. And the few eyewitness accounts we have are of the sky opening, something in the sky opening, and this big sort of, some people say like a cylinder object or a spherical object, others say sort of fire, and it causing mass devastation around this place called Tunguska. And so obviously this linked to my sort of dark rift work, because they were saying the sky opened. There's more than one eyewitness account that says this. And what else was strange is that the thing in the sky, they all say sort of moved in an arc, in a trajectory from southeast to northwest, also going quite slowly. I did a bit more digging, And above Tunguska at the exact time that this happened was the constellation Cassiopeia, which was exactly at the top of the sky. Let's call it a sky dome if we say like the stars are in a dome shape. Not talking about the dome model, but in a dome shape. So Cassiopeia was right above Tunguska at the time. And what NASA have said recently is that Cassiopeia is where the biggest explosion was recently using radio astronomy, which is a very real science. So what we have is above Tunguska was Cassiopeia, which NASA say is a hotspot. It's the most recent massive event, stroke explosion, stroke something. And Cassiopeia is also within the Dark Rift. It's not at the center of the Dark Rift, it's at the north side of the Dark Rift. So I've been theorizing that this was a mini cataclysm from the Dark Rift. And I presented this in the recent documentary and the documentary before, but this week's documentary has provided a bit more information. Yeah, so I call it could be like the smoking gun.
Sorry, I was just on mute there going through the live chat. Yeah, so you call it the smoking gun, and people can find out more information about this. This is in your book, Function and Cataclysm, that's right?
No, it's more in the two documentaries. The documentary Flat Earth, Dark Rift, Myth, Dome and Cataclysm, and this week's documentary Flat Earth, The Edge of Awakening.
I'm glad you bring up the recent one, Edge of Awakening. I was watching that earlier today. It's about, 94, 95 minutes. It's a feature-length documentary in any event. Can you give listeners some idea how much time and effort goes into editing, recording the voiceovers for a documentary of that length to upload to your YouTube channel?
Well, I'm a bit unorthodox because I sort of live up a mountain off-grid with very slow, flaky internet. And I'm using video software that's sort of freeware. So I haven't got the right tools at the moment, should we say. But for me, I did that. I mean, the information I've been collaborating for about a year, should we say. I mean, this is information I've been collecting for a year on and off. But to actually make it, I did that in like 8 days. But, you know, a couple of nights without much sleep. Forgot to eat for a couple of days. So I was pretty full on, pretty extreme. I mean, that's pretty quick, I think, doing that in 8 days. It's a lot of work. It really is a lot of work. Very fiddly, the software I'm using. Very fiddly indeed.
Well, what we'll do is, just on this topic of Tunguska, we'll go around the roundtable, we'll see if Dirth, there live from New York, has anything to add, and then we'll go to Matrix live from Spain.
I've always been fascinated in Tunguska, and what he was saying today is kind of new information to me, and I'm just processing it. So it's very interesting.
Matrix.
Yeah, well, they say there was I think, they were saying there's some kind of meteor caused that Tunguska thing, but I think in your video they say there wasn't a meteor found there, and I think in your recent video, Mark, you talk about meteorites and what the materials they're made of and so on, and you kind of you talk a lot about the dome and whether these things are falling from the dome, and I'm wondering what your point of view is on the dome and the stuff falling from it and these meteorites and things that we're supposedly observing.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't sure whether to put the meteorite information in because it's come to me quite recently, the meteorite information, but I thought I'd sling it in. But there's a lot more research to do. The iron meteorites all contain some nickel. And if it's not a dome, how come all these meteorites from all around space, shall we say, how come they all contain this strengthening, malleable, super strong metal? It does help point towards a dome for me, that all these iron meteorites contain nickel. It's very strange what we're told about meteorites, that they just dissolve when they impact the Earth. They explode and they dissolve. Now, I don't believe that metal dissolves. I mean, falling into this sort of 9/11 still melting.
Of course it does. On 9/11, the planes vaporized.
Yeah, sure. And so I got question marks over what's actually causing craters, because they don't actually find anything with craters. And I got question marks about these iron meteorites, because at Tunguska, again, nothing was found. And there's a lot of craters that I've looked into in the past, 30, 50 years, where they say, oh, we found a bit of meteorite, it's in this museum, there's a little bit here. This all looks like a big load of nonsense, because there's some examples I put in the documentary of people going to craters, studying there, looking for bits of meteorite and not finding any. So I'm looking at meteorites as being one thing and craters as being something else. And this is going to be hopefully my next line of research. But the fact that all meteorites, all iron meteorites contain this super metal, this nickel, and traces of cobalt, does help point towards the dome.
Mark, can I paraphrase some of the comments from one of the live commenters? His name is The Population Agenda, and he's a generally skeptical kind of person. And I'll paraphrase the line of questions that he's asking in the live chat right now. He says, what actual evidence do we have? How can we be confident in the evidence as to the metal content or the chemical content of these meteorites?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, how can we be confident of anything? But from different sources online, not just say Wikipedia, which is probably a massive gatekeeper itself, from different sources online, from different independent researchers, they do say that iron meteorites do contain between, I think it's between 18 and 35% nickel and like 0.1% of cobalt. And this is pretty much standard information. You can go to different places online about meteorites. But of course, unless you've got a meteorite in front of you and you're dissecting it yourself, it's hard to know completely 100%. But this guy's welcome to look at these parts of the documentary and email me, and we'll try and fathom it out together and get some harder evidence. As I said 10 minutes ago, the meteorite stuff's quite new, and I want to do further research into it. But from the places I did look, they all said the same thing. Iron meteorites contain nickel.
Because I haven't looked into Tunguska myself in any great depth, so I don't pretend for a moment that I'm qualified to say that it was a legitimate event or that it wasn't. But just based on what I saw in your documentary, it occurred to me that this would be the kind of thing that if it was genuinely potentially paradigm-changing or genuinely earth-shaking, pardon the pun, the people who control the media and control the information, they'd find a way to keep it from getting to us. So the fact that it did make it out to us makes me skeptical as to whether or not the event, took place the way that we're told. I mean, I think the story goes that these trees were still lying flat 20 years after the event supposedly happened. How would they let those photos get out to the public in the first place?
Yeah, this is good points, but Tunguska is completely cloaked in nonsense information. Like there's a lake nearby and they're saying, oh yeah, the big meteorite created that, but there was no meteorite ever found. When you study Tunguska, you do see a murky world of disinformation. You do see a lot of different websites saying massively different things. And this also alludes to the point that, hey, this is something we need to look at closer because they're obviously trying to cover something up. But I feel, from my research, and I've been researching a long time, that I've extracted the points that in my intuition and my logic, I feel are the points that are the ones we should be looking at.
Durf.
How do you explain with the dome things like Halley's Comet? Something comes around. I mean, is that inside the dome? Is it out of our view? I mean, how do you explain that?
I would explain it. I mean, this is something I come across this week, and I was like, oh, I should have a deeper look at that. But again, it's probably a light in the sky. I've yet to see any proof that it's actually solid. It could be like Venus. It's the morning star. It sort of goes down and disappears below. Then it comes up as the evening star, disappears below, comes up as alternates between the morning and evening star.
So just a much longer cycle.
A longer cycle.
Okay.
We can explain it a bit like the way we explain Venus. It's another energetic, astrological clockwork luminary that comes and goes. It's a part of the clockwork. That's how I'd explain it at this moment in time.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I think Halley's Comet is a part of our solar system, so it's just a case of what size, how big is the solar system, and how things work. Last night, there's a guy called flat earther called Joseph Climera who's been brought up that we should all be looking at the Perseid meteors that are hitting the Earth that are visible right now, and last night I'm looking at it, and these meteors, I'm wondering what they are. What am I seeing there? And they're supposed to be meteors hitting the atmosphere and burning up and so on. But one thing I observed, and he mentioned observing, is that what direction these meteors are coming from, and whether they're coming down from the sky towards the horizon, or whether they're coming up from the horizon. And if they were coming up from the horizon, that would lend weight to the ball Earth model. But it appeared, from what I saw last night, I saw 4 or 5 of these meteors, and they were all heading downwards towards the horizon. So I saw none coming up on the horizon. So this might be an aspect of the investigation that people could be doing to try and find out which model it is. And they definitely appear to be mysterious.
These are really good points. I mean, the meteor showers that we see, and they're cyclic. They say, oh, the meteor showers coming in a month. They're sort of cyclic. But the meteor showers we see, they're just lights in the sky. What's to say they're actually meteorites? I've not seen any evidence to say they're actually meteorites. I just see lights in the sky, like shooting stars, like luminaries moving, like energy moving. So when we call them meteor showers, I've got big questions over whether that's the right label for them or not.
Right, yeah.
Who is it? We talked about it pre-show. Who is it that was saying that all of the meteors that we see, it was our guest last week, Stars or Souls, that you never see them going up. You'll only see them going down. Have you noticed anything like that, Mark?
This is a really good point that I picked up on last week, and I did a couple of memes about. I think it's even in the documentary. You never see shooting stars come up from below the horizon or up diagonally from below the horizon. This really helps the flat Earth model. No human has ever seen a shooting star or a meteor shower from below the horizon go up. And if we're on a ball, you should see this loads of times.
Sure.
This is a really good point.
And people from below the horizon seeing that same star will see it going down, if the ball is true. But you never see it no matter where you are on the planet.
This is totally true. But I'm getting to a point now where I'm sort of over debating with ball earthers, because it's just like banging your head against the wall a lot of the time. And I think one of you guys, I think it was John, said something really smart last week, said if they find one thing that you can't explain, you say, oh, well, I don't know. They sort of point and jump up and down and say, oh, it's a ball, it's a ball, it's a ball. If they find one thing that you don't know. And I'm just finding it a bit painful debating with some of these ballers. It's like, okay, I've had some multi-dimensional experiences with ayahuasca. I'm not going to go and find loads of atheists and try and get them to believe that you can have multi-dimensional experiences. It's a waste of my time. I'm starting to feel the similar thing with a lot of ball earthers.
Yeah, and as I've said, I think it might have been getting the technical difficulties sorted out while you were away. What I said was that for me, we've spent the first 9 episodes of this season, and we're coming towards the end of the season now, explaining some of the many problems with the spinning ball model. And tonight I've been happy to have a show where there's a bit more speculation about other potential explanations for what we see, because anyone who's been following the show from the start has already seen there are many problems with the spinning ball, and it's almost like covering old territory again if we were to sit here and talk about the Bedford level experiments or water, never curving the way that we're told that it curves, or the horizon rising to eye level, or any of these things. We've covered it so many times. Tonight I was happy to have a show that was a little bit more speculation. So I hope the listeners can appreciate that. And if this is the first time you've listened to the Ball Earth Skeptic Roundtable, feel free to go back through the back catalogue and listen to one of the many shows where we talked about all of the problems with the spinning ball model. And Mark, I completely get where you're coming from. You reach a certain point where you realise the Copernican heliocentric model is, you use the word train wreck, and I think that's what it is. It's a train wreck. It's ridiculous. It's terrible. You almost get over debunking it. So there are a few people in the live chat. we've got 90 people watching live right now. Most of them are engaging in good conversation in the live chat. There are 1 or 2 who don't seem too impressed that we're not being, I don't know how to articulate this one. They're not happy that we're getting engaged in this kind of speculation, because to them, they'd rather we just focus on destroying the ball model. But I think we've done that in the first 9 episodes of the season, so they'll have to let us indulge tonight in a little bit of speculation as to what might actually be going on, because clearly the Copernican model that we're taught at school is boulder dash. Mark, what say you? We haven't lost Mark again, have we? It's every time I go on one of my monologues, Mark disappears, and I keep thinking to myself, when I throw to him, it makes people think.
No, I'm here, guys.
Are you there?
Yep, I'm here. It sort of wobbled for a bit, though.
Well, I'll tell you what we're going to do, because we are coming towards the end of the show. We try and keep them to 2 hours or not too much more than that. So let's get into the general discussion section now, where we just touch on a few different topics. I've got a few things that I wanted to bring up with you, Mark. One of them was that you brought up on Lisa's show, and I think this was a little bit to her chagrin because it went against, from my impression, her worldview. You said that you think that aliens are a hoax. Do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, I don't think that aliens in spaceships, 3D, physical nuts and bolts. I don't think that exists. I think that's a massive hoax. It's a massive thing on the internet to pull us into this strange other lives, other planets. But I do believe that there are other interdimensional sentient beings. I do believe that. And I do believe that some things can come into this frequency and then dip out of this frequency. But I don't believe in the 3D physical nuts and bolts aliens. It's just A, massive conjecture, B, not enough evidence. And that's where I'm at on that. I just see it as a massive diversion, a massive place to take truth seekers to a really crazy place where it's massively crazy. I mean, you know, Stephen Greer, massive proponent of aliens.
I'm not familiar with Stephen Greer, but this does tie in, even with what we were speaking about earlier with Art Bell. I think the idea of aliens and ancient aliens and these kinds of things, that's where they want to herd, alternative people who don't necessarily accept the mainstream view on everything. They want to herd those people into believing in aliens and ancient aliens, because it's one of those rabbit holes that will never end, will never take you anywhere, can be easily led and potentially even used to the advantage of the powers that be if and when they want to use a fake alien invasion to implement whatever their next plan of the agenda is. So to me, I agree with you. I think the idea of aliens as they're presented is a hoax. And you look at some of the stuff that's being pushed by NASA at the moment to do with, just recently we heard that there are, a billion Earth-like planets in this galaxy, or some ridiculous story that they're now peddling. And you have to think through, why would NASA now be coming out with these silly stories about all of these other Earths, if not to condition the minds of the masses to think that eventually we're going to find life on one of those planets? And then when we do, how is that fake story going to be used against us? So when you said that you thought that aliens are a hoax on Lisa's show, I was impressed to hear it, especially because I was under the impression at the time that you might have been talking to someone who is completely on board with the alien agenda. I want to throw to you there, Matrix, live from Spain. What are your thoughts on all of this?
Well, I think I agree with what Mark said and what you just said. I mean, I think the whole alien subject, I think there's an agenda behind that. I mean, they've been pushing it since Orson Welles, and his War of the Worlds broadcast, and then you've got the Area 51, and a whole culture has been built up out of this whole idea about aliens existing, and different good aliens, bad aliens, different types, and so on. And there really seems to be very little hard proof of that. And I see it as a way of them reinforcing the whole globe model aspect of things. The universe, it's all part of all interrelated, and is a subject that really kind of goes nowhere. And sucks a lot of people in. So I think it's pretty obvious that it seems to be some kind of psychological operation to keep people in fear, keep them lost of who they are. It's all part of the deception, I think. And I agree with Mark. I think there's more of an interdimensional, spiritual elements, beings, whatever you want to call them. I think there's I think this is what people are experiencing when they talk about aliens. Aspects of that.
Well, I know that Dearth will argue that aliens still work and possibly work better on an infinite plane or puddle theory model. I'll throw to you in a moment there, Dearth, but for me it seems as though most of what's presented when it comes to aliens, science fiction that's all over televisions and the cinemas and books and what have you, it builds upon the false notion that we live in a universe in the first place. So it's a conspiracy theory that's built on a foundational lie, if that makes sense. It's a line of thinking that builds upon a foundational lie. So once people buy into the idea of aliens from another planet or from another galaxy, they've had to, whether they realize it or not, also buy into the Copernican heliocentric model. So anyone who's emotionally invested in the idea of space aliens or alien abductions or ancient aliens or any of these things, anyone who's emotionally invested in any of that, especially if they feel as though they have direct experience with it, it's going to be that much harder for them to give up the spinning ball model. And I think what we're seeing at the moment is that a lot of the resistance from the so-called truth community is from people who have, whether they realize it or not, bought into this alien paradigm that's been given to them. And unfortunately, because that builds upon the false Copernican model in many ways, it's that much harder for them to let go of this altogether. But Dirth, I know that you've got views about how aliens can still fit into the infinite plane. Do you want to let us know what those are?
Sure. There's so much evidence out there that there are non-human beings. You know, the Lloyd Pye had the Star Child skull. Back in ancient Egypt, they had all of the cone heads. All the pharaohs had, twice the brain capacity. There's so many variations of the human body, and when you and they're them traveling from beyond the Arctic ice wall, from just thousands of miles away instead of incomprehensible trillions of light years, which is impossible, makes a ton more sense. And so I believe that there is a psyop on aliens to say, any of them that have come over here and have been seen, there's so many UFO unidentified. Most of them are our technology, but some of them might be coming from other places beyond the ice wall. They explain it by saying they're extraterrestrials. They're coming from other planets, which pushes the ball Earth, planetoid paradigm that we live in. And it's actually extraterrestrials are helping them keep the flat Earth a secret. When in fact, if you really think about it, that's the only thing that makes sense. That other life forms, very similar to human, probably shares 98% of our DNA, are living on other parts of this world, this flat world that we live on. And it's not just a little disk where it ends at the Antarctic ice wall. It continues on and on, whether there's a dome over it or it goes on endlessly or it goes on just farther than we can comprehend. I don't know the answer to that, but all of that makes so much more sense, fits in. And as far as there being other other layers of extraterrestrials, different dimensions, I believe all of that stuff. I mean, there's all sorts of forces beyond this low vibration of 3D that we live on, down here at this density. It's all there. It doesn't exclude one from the other. So I believe that they're using that as, to keep us confused, saying they're coming from other planets rather than, hey, you know what, they're really only about 10,000 miles away.
We're going to have to wrap the show up soon. It is 1:45 in the morning here in Brisbane. But Mark, I know that you wanted to touch briefly on Stephen Greer, so I'll throw the floor to you.
Okay, yeah, he's probably the main guy trying to promote alien disclosure over the last 10 years. I know I was involved with someone working on a free energy project. This was about 6 years ago. And this guy I knew, he went to some geoexopolitics conference in Barcelona. And Stephen Greer threatened his life. And from what I was told, Stephen Greer is an agent. He's a massive gatekeeper. And he keeps trying to push this, all aliens are good, and things like this. And so any listeners see from Stephen Greer, I would advise him to have a big question mark. I am open to the fact that it's open to the idea that there's possible creator beings beyond this reality, and that this could be some sort of experiment or sort of organic library, or the imagination can run wild. But I don't believe they're nuts and bolts physical. I'd be more thinking they're non-physical, living in a different frequency, because this 3D reality we're in, it's a very small frequency of the electromagnetic spectrum, and for us to think, all other sort of sentient life, intelligent life, whether more evolved or less evolved than us, exists in this electromagnetic spectrum just seems a little bit strange for me. Also, I want to pick up on that point on the other lands, the infinite lands thing. in my latest documentary, I showed that the stars, if they're 3 to 10,000 miles away, they go below the horizon. So they would actually go through this infinite land. What did the other guys think of this? I don't know if they caught this on the documentary. I had a little Stellarium clip in there.
Well, let's go around the round table. Matrix.
Yeah, well, I'm not too sure about it. I mean, in your documentary, you show a couple of images, and where you have like the flat Earth kind of in space, surrounded by a sphere. Perhaps is that what you're suggesting?
Well, it was more like Stellarium, where we're sort of standing on this flat Earth, and then if we look to the south from the Falkland Islands, the stars actually go below the horizon. And but if there's an infinite plane, then obviously at 3 to 10,000 miles away, these stars are going through the horizon. And this, to me, did put a little dent into the infinite plane theory. It doesn't kill it, for sure, but for me, it did put a dent into it.
As you said, you know, are they stars or are they just lights in the sky like Halley's Comet?
Yeah, I mean, they could just be, they are luminaries, but if they're going through the floor, then it doesn't seem right. And also with this infinite land, obviously people have got to be talking about other suns, haven't they? Because obviously 4,000 or even 1,000 miles away, it's super cold. And I've got a theory that, again, conjecture, that in Antarctica, all these bases and science projects, they're probably launching drones, but when they get 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 miles away, because they want to explore, these drones are getting mangled by the weather conditions. And then they've got these bases in Antarctica probably to create new drones and new technology and to learn and develop and research to keep trying to go further. This is a theory I have on what's going on in Antarctica.
Do you buy into the Admiral Byrd story of finding a tropical land inside the wall of Antarctica?
I don't buy into it, but I don't rule it out. It's another tree, it's another branch with a fruit of information that it's good to be wary of. That's the way I look at it at the moment.
It's just a story, and we don't have any proof other than what he says. But you know, the events that happened around that time, you know, the Antarctic Treaty and the Van Allen ice, the Van Allen radiation, you know, belt being announced the same year, kind of put a dome over us and a dome around us. You know, it could be anything.
If it's tropical, there has to be a sun there. There has to be some heat source.
Right, and then there's very sketchy reports of times in Antarctica where they saw a second sun, and perhaps, you know, we saw the late winter of the northern part of the next thermal pocket, where the sun came within viewing distance when the weather was clear enough, and you know, it was seen, and maybe that's an explanation of what it is. But you know, if this is a flat plane and the sun is, you know, very close to us, and it is not what they tell us it is, why would there be just one? Maybe there's just one. Maybe there's hundreds of million of them.
I mean, one thing the movement could do, you know, whether it's a movement or not, is like when these planes, you know, there's a lot of scientists in Antarctica. When these planes come back and they go back to see their families, we're at the airport and we give them loads of leaflets and DVDs until we get one on board, and then we've got our own agent in Antarctica. I mean, this is something that would really help us out.
Just quickly, Dirth, you say that there are sketchy reports of a second sun in Antarctica. Where are these reports coming from, man?
You know, I've seen some video from the Niemeyer station, other independent videos, and I'm saying I agree, it's sketchy, but there's old stories about it. There's sketchy information, can't confirm it, coming from all over the place, and it makes sense, but I would not count it as proof. Again, this is just a theory that makes a lot more sense than anything else we've been told, and I'm looking for evidence to prove it or disprove it. Haven't found either.
Like even someone like Admiral Byrd, right now, this is a guy who was, supposedly one of the top military men of his time, and he's on television, which has been controlled right from the outset. Why would anyone believe that anything that he said wasn't meant to be heard by us, the masses?
I agree. I don't know the answer. It's like, why would they put that story out that would, I don't know. I mean, everything can't be a lie. Something has to be true. Trying to find out what that truth is. Something has to be true. Where are we? What is this thing we're sitting on? How did it get here? Where does it go? How does it work? I don't know the answers, but we know the lies already.
I mean, I'll give a little teaser out there to the audience. I'm working on a few videos at the moment, but I challenge them to go and look into how it is that we came to believe that the Earth and the Sun are about 93 million miles away. Go and look into the history of when estimates were made and by whom, and take a little note at the dates that are given for these characters. And they are characters. They're not. Look, I'm not going to give too much away, but do yourselves a favor, listeners. Go and check out, how did we come to believe that we are 93 million miles from the sun? I'm not even asking you to debunk that distance. Just go and look at the history behind it. Who was it that told us that we were a certain distance? And when did they tell us? And you'll notice that there's a significant gap in the timeline. And that's all I'll say. That's a bit of homework that listeners can do. Now, we do have to wrap the show up soon. Before we do, I want to read out a couple questions from the live chat, and also a couple questions of my own, Mark. So hopefully you can stick around for another few minutes. Just quickly, in the live chat, Katarina says that she's enjoyed the speculation, and as I said, we're coming towards the end of the season, so I don't mind it that we've done that, and like I said, many of the listeners enjoy it. Mike Judd says 100 years of alien sci-fi filth. Now, I've got a couple of, and he's talking, of course, about the fact that we've been getting propagandized with alien science fiction for 100 years, and if you think that's an accident, then I can't help you. Just a couple more things from me. Quickly, you might have touched on it earlier, but can you just give us a bit more detail? I heard in your interview with Lisa, Mark, that you actually called up Antarctica. I'm not sure if I misheard the story, but I thought I heard you say that you called up Antarctica as a piss take, and then you started getting emails from them not to come down. Can you please correct me if I've misheard your story? What exactly happened?
Yeah. I looked on the map, the flat Earth map, and I was like, okay, India and Hawaii, these are the points where they don't want you to access from. Well, the access points are like Chile, New Zealand, South Africa. And in between them, you've got like Hawaii and India. And I phoned them up and I said, look, I'm super rich. I'm like stinking rich. My mates are stinking rich. We've got all the gear. We're coming from Hawaii and India with loads of boats. We've got all the gear. Don't worry about us. We're going to the South Pole. We do our own thing. And I sort of did it as a bit of a laugh. And they went fucking crazy. They sent me emails. Who are you? Who do you think you are? Where's your orange permit? Have you filled out a yellow B2 form? Here's this application form. Who are you? And I got like 6 emails, like bang, within 20 minutes. Serious. And I was like, ooh, that's a bit strange. And I think I hit a nerve because I was like, I'm not going through South Africa or New Zealand or Chile, South America. I'm going from India and Hawaii, which are in the middle, in the gaps, shall we say. And they went crazy.
Sorry about the dead air to the listeners. Sometimes I check out the live chat and Dirth doesn't jump in time. But Dirth,
I was jumping in. You friggin' stepped on me. I was talking.
Go.
No, I was just saying that fact that they jumped on you that fast, that nobody's allowed to go there, that no one, you're not even allowed to question it until 2040, I believe is the year, that, oil companies, we all agree. When on this planet did anyone agree not to look into something that nobody owned? Never. I mean, there's something there that, that is going to change the paradigm on Earth, and they don't want us to know it. And I want to know what it is. There you go. John, come on back, John.
No, you're right. Matrix, anything you want to add to this topic of Antarctica? Can we go there? Why can't we go there, etc.?
Yeah, it is a big question about Antarctica. I mean, there's a lot of people wondering, is there a dome? Is it an infinite plane? This is the big question about it, really. But I mean, equally, there's the North Pole as well. What is there? What is situated there? And it's probably, it's gaining a bit more attention now. Can we go there? It's an area of research as well. I've read some old documents from the 1500s, Dr. John Dee communicating with Mercator, and they talk about a mountain being at the center there, and there's waters all flowing inwards towards the North Pole there. The tides, boats are dragged in, and there's like some big whirlpool there. So I think there's both of the poles are interesting and to be looked at and investigated. I mean, there's the reason why people have been looking at Antarctica because of the dome and the flat thing, but there's also the North Pole, which is another big aspect of it. I think the idea of the dome. I think that's a strong possibility, but based on a lot of the work that Mark's done, and he also talks about how there's symbolism in like the Vatican dome and the Washington dome, and how these domes are built on pillars. It pretty much describes the biblical model. So and these domes are found all over the earth, in different countries. In Russia, India, and so on. And I think there's a lot of symbolism there that relates to the possibility of there being a dome. It's what is at the center of the dome also, what is controlling it. I mean, Eric Dubay talks about Mount Meru, and he's kind of it. And I'm wondering what Mark's thoughts are on the North Pole.
Yeah, this is North Pole is very interesting, and it is being overlooked. These are really, really good points you just made. I mean, the Northern Lights, I mean, I've seen them with my own eyes. This is like beautiful energy. This is almost like spiritual energy, for want of better words. And I don't believe that the Northern Lights exist in the south. I've yet to see enough evidence. But I've been North Sweden, and I have seen the Northern Lights. I know they exist. Now, I've looked into Mount Meru and some other things, and it's possible. I mean, I like what I put in my second documentary with the Tibetan framework. They've got different realities on top of each other, which are in frequency. It's not like physical, this 3D flesh and bone realities above and below, but there's different frequencies. So below us are realities that are denser, like more darker, shall we say, and above us are more realities at a higher frequency. So a lot of the ancient Buddhist world talks about this like stacked sandwich, shall we say, where we're in just one reality, but there's a lot of realities above us and below us. Maybe the North Pole is like the thread that goes through them all. And maybe the Northern Lights is like some sort of sign or symbolism for that. But also the Northern Lights could be something like the electromagnetics, because the North is continually splurging out its electromagnetics, feeding the South. So the North is also somewhere we're not allowed to go. And in the Flat Earth community, we keep chanting the South Pole, Antarctica. But I think you're right. I think the North Pole is super, super interesting. And I think it's heavily guarded as well.
Yeah, it's definitely something we should be looking into at the same time, I think. Darth?
I believe didn't Hitler go there during his reign? Went to the North Pole and Antarctica multiple times. Something's going on there that the elite know about, and it's being kept secret from the population.
Yeah, and then, Dirth, we come back to that same problem of how much do we trust of what we were told about what any of the leaders were doing back in World War II? With regards to
I'm gonna back out of that statement. You're right. As Mark said earlier in the show, it's like, what can you believe? I mean, can you discredit every single thing that we've ever been told? You kind of have to pick and choose a little bit and try to find some evidence to back it up. But sure.
Well, maybe you about flat earthers have to, but if you're just a regular skeptic like myself, you can say, you know what, I'll believe it if you show me some evidence. If I see some photos that look legitimate of Hitler at the North Pole or at the South Pole or whatever, I'm happy to believe it. But in the meantime, we know that we've been given so many lies about World War II, any connection. I mean, we're told that there was an operation, what was it, deep freeze or high jump to go and find the Nazis in Antarctica or whatever. I mean, how do we know that how much of that was actually legitimate? I mean, here we are in 2015, and really the video evidence that we've got is all coming from YouTube, from videos that people are supposedly taken from archives and then uploaded to YouTube. Now, if we're willing to entertain the idea that maybe some or even a large portion of this current flat earth phenomenon is being pushed by people from above, then doesn't it just as easily follow that all the evidence that's being used, such as Admiral Byrd or Hitler at the North or South Pole or whatever the story is, isn't it just as possible that that's also finding its way into YouTube and into the mainstream from the same people. Isn't that just as possible, Dirth?
Absolutely, 100%.
You know, and I heard on, and again, I've mentioned her a few times. There's a lady called Lisa Harrison who I've only listened to when she's interviewed Mark Sargent and our guest tonight, Mark Knight of WaykiWayki. I'm not normally a listener of those kinds of podcasts, and I'll link to that particular interview with Mark underneath this video on YouTube. In that interview, there was some talk about the way that the pyramids or the Sphinx or something like this, it matches up with where the constellations were 1,000 years ago or something like this. And I would say, well, that's possible, but where's the documented evidence of anything matching up with anything back then? I mean, it seems to me as though you don't have to dig too far into history to find out that a lot of it's complete fabrication. So how can we be sitting here and saying that any of these supposedly ancient artifacts lined up with anything in the skies? That was really an open-ended question. I should have directed that to someone. Mark, do you get where I'm coming from? And again, I'm not here to attack any of what you've presented tonight necessarily, but just from a general sense, can you see how there are many people out there who come into ball earth skepticism like myself, and we got here from a general skepticism, which leads us to be just as skeptical of the stories about Admiral Byrd as we are of the stories of Nikolai Copernicus, as we are of the supposedly ancient ruins of Egypt or Stonehenge, as we are of the meteorites and their supposed chemical composition, as we are of things like the trees all being knocked down in that area in Siberia, whatever it was. Like, can you see how people like me were saying, you know what, we've been lied to by the media and by the supposed scientific establishment about so much. We're at the point, I don't want to speak for others, but I'm at the point where I'm like, you know what, I'm not going to believe any of what I'm told until I'm being told it by people who are also going to give me solid evidence that I can verify for myself.
Yeah, I completely understand all this, and this is the game we're in. We're in this sort of truth information war game where it's like it's hard to know what to believe, and the only key is discernment. Discernment's a key word. So you have to take your intuition to the gym, and you have to take your discernment to the gym. And you have to make errors. You have to be in this game for a few years, and you have to do research, and you have to make some errors, and then you learn from your errors. And the key is discernment. And unfortunately, discernment's not a lesson they teach at school. And that's what I would say on that subject. It's all about discernment.
Well, I tell you what, we're going to have to wrap the show up soon, but what we'll do is I want to give both Matrix and Dirth a chance to ask you a final question or bring up one final point, and then we'll get into our final thoughts after that. But while we're lucky enough to have with us Mark Knight of WaykiWayki, I'll go to you first there, Dirth, live from New York. Final question or comment that you want to put to Mark Knight?
Do you have any comment on radar proving that the Earth isn't flat? There's a lot of people that were mentioning it early in the chat, and I've been messaged by many people on Deep Inside the Rabbit Hole saying that radar proves that the Earth isn't round. Now, to me, a radar station on a flat Earth makes a lot more sense than a radar station on a ball Earth. Do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, to me it makes loads of sense on a flat Earth. Triangulation makes more sense on a flat Earth. And as I said in my documentary, if these guys are still on the fence they don't know what reality they're in, whether it's ball or flat, I wouldn't go to work. I would make this your prime objective to find out in yourself whether it's flat or a ball. Because if you don't know, you're in a kind of crazy space. And as I said in my documentary, I would go to that Facebook group, Ball Earth v Flat Earth. There's 5,000 people there. There's about 50 debates a day. You don't have to say anything. You can sit there and watch, because these debates are rolling all the time, 24 hours a day. But for me, the radar doesn't prove that we live on a ball, not by any stretch.
Okay, thanks.
Well, I wanted to ask Mark earlier on when he dropped out. As you're studying of the Kabbalah and the 10 Sephirot, right? I was wondering, is there anything in that alludes to the flat Earth?
There sort of is, but it's too long a story. But there's stuff in my second book, which is a Kabbalistic book, and that does allude to it. There's also something interesting where it's got the Venus and Mercury in front of the Sun on the Tree of Life. I've been looking at the Tree of Life a bit with new eyes since the Flat Earth, and it does fit. But there's some stuff I could say that wouldn't mean anything. You'd have to go through the washing machine of the Tree of Life for it to make some sense. So all I could say there is, yes, there's nothing that rules out the Flat Earth within the Kabbalah. There is a sort of key in there about the Earth, which is the 10th Sephiroth, which is also in Manly P. Hall's work. It's also in Dean Fortune's work. It's also in my second book. There is a sort of key stroke riddle about 10th Sephiroth Malchut, which is the Earth, which does allude to it being. It does allude to something different to what we know.
Right. Cool. And in your documentary, you talk about karma and unenlightening. Unlightening, is it? And the process of the awakening, and also you mentioned women's intuition on this subject and how women are seem to be more open to the flat Earth subject.
Yep. I mean, I'm like, where were they? I mean, when we were all looking at 9/11, Sandy Hook, I don't know where they were. I think they're all in the vegan food movement, but they seem to have come out in their droves really for the flat Earth thing. And as I said in the documentary, when you speak to a girl about the flat Earth thing, they tend to be more open and more intuitive than the men. It's quite an interesting thing, and it also brings a touch of grace to the community as well. Because as we all know, us all being boys, with like Sandy Hook or 9/11, we've all ended up in big sort of fights and ego battles. But with a lot of girls in the flat Earth community, it does tend to soften things and bring a bit of grace to it, which is more than welcome.
Yeah, definitely. John?
Yeah, I've got a couple of things I wanted to bring up, and I'll get the opinions of the Roundtable. We'll probably round this episode off at 3 hours, so we've got a few minutes left. The first thing I wanted to throw to you, WaykiWayki, was that in your most recent documentary, you started off by saying that there's been people apparently accusing you of making your videos to make money, and you've pointed out that the monetization on your videos is from third-party content. The same thing happens with my videos, not just on this show, but other shows that I've done. I play music because I like music breaks, I like intros and outros and that kind of thing. So what happens is, for those who haven't used YouTube before, if you use someone else's content, then they get the right to monetize your video, which personally I don't have a problem with. They own the song, I've played their song, they can play their ads on my video. I use ad block, so I never even get the ads anyway. It doesn't bother me. And if the ads bother people, they should just get an extension like ad block. The point of the story here is, though, that you're not making money from the videos that you upload. And I noticed in the comments underneath your video that people were saying, Wakey, you've got every right to make money off this if you want. Of course, the book that you released, the 100-page PDF about the moon, that's been made available for free. So you're doing a lot of research and providing it for people without expecting any recompense. What are your views generally about people who do have donate buttons on their YouTube or who do ask for donations on GoFundMe? Generally speaking, we'll go around the round table on this, what do you think about the idea of people not necessarily asking for money, but accepting money from those who wish to give it?
I don't have a problem with that. It's if it's pushed, then it becomes a bit of a problem. Then it can demean someone's work. Like if at the start of every blog article I did, I was like, please donate, it would demean the article. So people, if they want to be taken seriously, I think they have to be kind of discreet and kind of calm about that. But yeah, it's okay to accept money. We all need sort of what I call it bio-survival chips in today's capitalistic world. I don't have a problem with it. It's when it's pushed and asked for, I have a problem with it.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I want to get your views there. We'll go to your first, Matrix. What do you think about this idea that people like you make your videos for free? It's time that you put in, you enjoy it, you don't ask for money. I don't think there's a donate button on your YouTube channel. There's certainly not one on mine. But I think this is something that, it's worth discussing, not necessarily for our show, but just generally speaking. Does allowing people to donate to you and having a donate button on your channel discredit your work, or do you think it's a legitimate thing to do?
I think I'm fine with it, really. I don't ask for any donations or put adverts on my videos either. I don't have a problem with it. I think if people are putting time and effort into this subject, and if people want to support those people, I think that's fine. I see that as being a good thing. I mean, if people have the money to spare to help other people out, and a lot of people are getting money for performing these experiments and doing things like that, and I think that's cool. Yeah, so I don't have a problem with it. I mean, yeah.
Dirth?
I didn't have a donate button on I don't have a donate button on my YouTube channel, but a lot of people were messaging me on Rabbit Hole saying, hey, where can I donate? So I put a PayPal donate button on my website deep inside the Rabbit Hole. and there was blogs written about me, how I'm a shill, it's only doing it for money, I'm making thousands of dollars on ads. I never made a penny. I've spent $10,000, tens of thousands of dollars on my, ability to get the truth out there, and I probably got $100 in donations. So, I don't have any problem with it, but the shills will run as soon as you say you're accepting money, you are doing it for the money, and they try to discredit everything you do.
Well, one of the things that I think is so terrific about this burgeoning neo-flat Earth movement, the ball Earth skepticism, this kind of thing, is that so many people are putting time into this and they're being rewarded just from the information that they're gleaning from it. Then if they can share that with other people, it makes it even better. So for me personally, I haven't accepted any money for this. One of my listeners bought me lunch the other day. She refused to let me pay for lunch. So that's terrific. But I get a good feeling just from doing this kind of work. And I think, WaykiWayki, I'm sure you'd agree that when people leave comments saying that your videos, they find them uplifting, or they feel as though because you're saying what you're saying, they have more courage to do it, that in and of itself is enough recompense. I'd be surprised if there are many people who get into this kind of thing just for the money.
Yeah, I agree. I've had some really nice things said. Also, I had some bad things said. Someone said I should fly a fighter jet into my head, which I've sort of contemplated and found hard, because if I'm flying it, I'm not sure how I can fly it into my head. I have actually had a few donations, which was very kind, and yeah, I accepted them because it gave me some freedom to do some more work. And I didn't spend it on anything else but, the time to do more research. So I didn't say no. I did accept a couple of donations. And with your lunch, John, it might be because she just likes you. It might not be anything to do with Flat Earth,
Well, I hope so, but she might be listening. So Ixnay on the 80 lay, okay?
Hey, I mentioned it in the chat earlier, John. I'm not sure if you saw, but can you explain the similarity between your logo and the Flat Earth model? Is that just a pure coincidence, or have you been planning this for years?
Have you gone and used some kind of photo editor to superimpose my logo onto the azimuth map?
I just put it on top of it, and it lines up beautifully.
I was wondering how long it would take someone to work out my devious plan to infiltrate the YouTube truth community, to drop the bombshell of the Flat Earth, and to destroy the whole thing from the bottom up. So thanks, Dirth. On episode 10 of the Ball Earth Skeptic Roundtable, you've exposed me.
Busted.
Poor WaykiWayki. Not only has he got the technical difficulties and the heat wave in Spain, he's sitting there wondering what on earth is going on. This is a little bit of back and forth. Poor deep inside the rabbit hole. Ever since I pointed out that his logo's got 3 6s in it, he's been doing his best to try and expose me, and this is the best that he's come up with.
All right.
Almost time to wrap it up. I had one more thing I wanted to run past you there, WaykiWayki, and thanks to listeners for bearing with us. It is 1 o'clock in the morning here, so if I sound a little bit tired, you can understand why. One more thing, WaykiWayki. I heard you say in your interview with Lisa Harrison that you think that young people today are more critical and can think for themselves better. Now, I don't mean to disagree with you as our final point before we wrap the show up, but when I heard that, I thought to myself, there are a lot of people now who are thinking critically and are starting to question things, and I think that's terrific. Obviously, we've got the internet now, so it's easier for us to do that. If somebody like Learn of the Jesuit Order sees problems with atomic weapons testing footage and believes that it's fake, he can share that. People can comment, they can collaborate. This is all terrific stuff, but I look at younger people today, I listen to them, sometimes I try and engage and converse with them, and I'm convinced that some of these people are the most zombified humans who've ever walked the face of the earth, and I'm not really sure there's that much hope for them. Are you really that hopeful that younger people today are going to be more critical about all of this?
This is a really good point. What I'm saying is both are true. The new souls coming through, like the youngsters, they're really like below 12. They're like questioning. They're not cool with authority. Like the parents like sit down. In the 50s, 60s, the kids would sit down. Now the kids are like, I'm not listening to you. I'm not sitting down quiet. But what's happening is from the age of 12, the MTV, Matrix, the system's getting them. The smartphones, the tablets, and you're right. The kids who are 15, 16, 17, super zombied up. But before that, naturally, what I'm saying is naturally they're really curious and they're not digging the authority, but then they're being got to at the age of 13, 14. They're being sexualized, they've got the tablets, the internet, and it's game over. So what I'm saying is both are true. There is a natural awakening with youngsters, but the system, the transhumanization, the sexualization, this is all getting to them. Another point on this I wanted to write about soon is they're saying kids are really boring, like 17 to 20-year-olds. Like when I was 17 to 20-year-old, we used to go out and cause absolute havoc, crazy parties, the lot. Now they don't, because they've all got video cameras in their pocket. So subconsciously, they're scared to act out of the norm because they're with 20 kids, they're with 20 lads at a party or something. No one steps out of line because subconsciously they know that every other person there is carrying a video camera. And this keeps the sheep in line. But they don't know this. It's all subconscious.
Yeah, I'm with you. And look, I love your optimism. And Rip Torn in the live chat, he says that he likes you because you're good at, sharing with people the enormity of this flat Earth thing. And your optimism is one of the things that I like about your work. For me, though, I can see a lot of people who are waking up to some of these massive lies. And then who knows how much further the lies go. I mean, when I found out about Sandy Hook and Boston bombings, if I'd have known then that those were nothing compared to what I was to learn later, I wouldn't have believed it. Then I found out about the nuclear bomb lies and the lies about World War II, and I thought, wow, the rabbit hole can't go much deeper than this. Then I found out that I was lied to about spinning ball, and at first I was like, wow, now I've cracked the code, now I've found the big lies. But I'm starting to think to myself, no, the rabbit hole must go deeper, and in fact, a lot of the research that I've been doing, it does actually go deeper than the lies of the ball Earth. I can't go into too much detail about that today, but I look at how deep these lies are, how long it's taken me to get here, and then I look at people around me, especially these younger people who are just so caught up in their social media, in their so-called reality TV. A lot of these people can't distinguish between reality and TV because of reality TV. I think that's a large part of why there's so much reality TV on TV today. They actually think that these cooking shows and dancing shows are reflective of real people, but they're just actors like everything else. Most people still think that the people reading the news from a teleprompter are actually journalists or genuine informative people, when, of course, as you and I well know, they're just a propaganda arm of the establishment. So I look around, and as much as I want to be optimistic, and I am very optimistic in many ways in a personal level, and the people that I deal with off the air and even on the air with people like yourself, I'm very optimistic about all of that. At the same time, I don't want to say resigned to the fact, but I've accepted that there are some people who just aren't going to make it. And I mean, we've touched on this today with the alien thing, to use just one example. Anyone who has listened to even a couple of our shows, myself and Matrix and Dearth, and any of your work, anyone who's really looked at that and then hasn't been compelled to go and do their own research, these aren't curious people. These are people who are pretty well locked into their patterns of thinking. It's no fault of their own. But they're never going anywhere, let's be honest. Some of them might pull themselves out, but the majority, they're never going anywhere. And I'm not trying to be pessimistic here, I'm not trying to come across the wrong way, but when I heard you say that you think that young people today are more critical, I thought, this is one of those things where I hope that I'm wrong and the guy that I'm listening to is right. So wake me, please convince me that we're going to wake up these kids, because I don't think there's much hope for most of them.
Yeah, this is a lot of my third book, where I look at a transhumanized dystopia in the near future, because that is where we're heading, to a transhumanized dystopia, unless a catalytic event comes. And I got a friend, he's into the DMT, he said he saw a critical mass awakening and a big evolution. But what is a critical mass awakening? As I said in the documentary, we're not even at 5% of the population being awake in any way. I mean, we're in some sort of zombie mind control framework. It's a very beautiful planet. Well, not planet, very beautiful Earth. But there's mind control everywhere. And it doesn't look good, the current trajectory we're on. And maybe some catalytic event, not cataclysmic, a catalytic event of some sort of different way, some different shape or form, whether it's economy or something could come along and change things very quickly. Like if a city's wiped out or the economy crashes, or, there's a lot of things on the table. But that's the only way people change, is through some massive event, through shock and surprise. Because at the moment, people are just getting led to some transhuman dystopia where they're fed everything. And it is kind of pessimistic. Yeah.
Mark, just quickly, sorry, Matrix, I'll throw it in a second. Just quickly, a poll came out here recently in Australia, and how much can you trust polls? Yeah, I get all of that. But this one, based on my own anecdotal experience, seems quite believable. This poll found that, and what it did was it just looked at Australian voters, when it comes to federal politics and their belief in extraterrestrial life. And what it found was that the young progressive voters, that is the educated people, the ones who've been to university, and in Australia, I'm sure it's similar in other countries now, they're really pushing university for just about everyone. Once upon a time, it was to go and get a specialised line of education so you could go and get a job that required it. Now they're pushing just about everyone into university for reasons that we don't have time to go into now. But the point is, these so-called educated people who've spent 13 years at school and then another 3 or 4 or 5 years at university, these kinds of people, up to 3/4 of them, believe in extraterrestrial alien life, which is more than the conservative voters and the other people. And it seems to me like belief in alien life is only on the rise. And I put to you guys, and I'll get your opinion on this, Matrix, and I want the listeners to think about this as well. I put to you guys that if the TV did say, no, maybe not now, but give it a few years, that there was an alien invasion on the way, people would sooner believe that than they would hear us point out that there's no curvature over the Bedford level and wonder about it. I mean, they're not even curious about the lack of curvature, but you tell them that we found life out in space, and they're probably going to believe it. That's how dumbs down they are, Matrix.
Yeah, that's what we've been led into, this whole programming, indoctrination, the whole transhumanism thing, how we're being connected to computers and iPhones and microchips and so on. It's definitely the agenda to do that, to enslave us all, to put us in a matrix, essentially, a literal matrix. And I know one of the things that you just said about the young people, I think, and catalyzing events and so on to change things. I think that the flat Earth subject and the space hoax and questioning science and that, and it could be doing that, could do it. And these young people are on the internet and they're aware of it, so it's kind of throwing a spanner in the works for the indoctrination process that everyone goes through, that we all went through. And so now people are going to say, well, I've heard the Earth, it might be flat, and they start to question these things. So that it has a ripple effect. And Mark mentioned in his video about it being a wave, and I think that's what's happening right now. So this could be the catalyzing thing, I think, that could change people's minds.
Dirth, anything you want to add?
The whole alien invasion thing, it sure looks like, from all the programming, that is something that they are planning on doing as a final step. The whole story about Werner von Braun saying that's going to be the final step. Again, do we know that's true? There's a lot of evidence that says he did say that, but with what NASA's coming out with, there was a Coast to Coast last week had somebody on saying, we discovered that Mars had the atmosphere blown off by a giant nuclear bomb the size of the Empire State Building, brought over by an extraterrestrial race. And that was the subject for the day. They're really getting us ready. I think if they announced it today, everybody, the majority would just believe it. And it's amazing. And they won't even question the flat Earth because it's ridiculous, because we've been programmed to the ball before we knew what 1 + 1 was.
Well, let's go to our guest, WaykiWayki, in the live chat, basically in the Google Hangouts. For those who haven't used one before, there's a side chat, and it looks as though Mark has asked if he can ask us a question. So, Mark, what we'll do is I'll give you a chance to respond to all of this. You can ask your question. And just as I'm doing that, is he back? All right, we're gonna wrap the show up soon. Matrix and Dirth, give me a suggestion for the music to play us out with in that side chat that we have on the Hangout. While we're doing that, Mark, was there a question that you wanted to ask us?
Yeah, I was just wondering why you're halting the season, John, because you think this is a really good forum to get people chatting, and seems to be gathering a good bit of traction, and it just seems a strange time to stop doing it. Is there some sort of reason for that? Yeah,
look, there is. Basically, I've been doing my original show, the ARP, for almost a year now, and I did another show called Sunday Sessions. We got through about, I think, 16 episodes. I wrapped that up a couple of weeks ago. And I mean, look, it's 1:23 in the morning here in Brisbane, and the listeners have probably noticed that as the show's gone on, I've gotten a little bit less well enunciated and a little bit less cogent in my thoughts, and that's natural. And I just feel like I need a little bit of a break to go and consolidate. And also, as you know, from doing research, you do enough research and your mind, I mean, this is all a deprogramming process, right? I truly believe that what we're talking about here isn't waking up. I like that term, but I think a better one is deprogramming. And at a certain point of deprogramming, I think it's worth taking a step back, taking a deep breath, going through your thoughts, maybe taking a few handwritten notes, reconsidering things, taking a few weeks away, and then coming back again. not just rejuvenated, in the physical sense, getting some proper sleep on a Wednesday night, but also, spiritually in a way. I mean, in the last year, I've gone from believing that Putin might actually be opposition to the New World Order and believing that martial law could be any day away, to now believing that we don't live on a spinning ball and that what is taught at university is just modern religion. In fact, it is every bit a religion today, and much of it actually came from the Jesuits and the Catholic Church. Like the people who I went to school with who went on to study science, I now fully believe that they're being indoctrinated, no different to what I used to believe people studying theology were indoctrinated with. So you see, I've come a long way in the time that I've been doing this show, and I think it'd be good for me and good for my listeners if I just spent a little bit of time away recapturing my thoughts and consolidating my thoughts, and I think we'll all be better off that way. But I can assure you that I've enjoyed doing this show. I've been able to talk to a whole bunch of cool people, stars of souls. Rory Cooper was terrific. I know that you use a lot of his photos in the book that you made. I mean, Rory Cooper has just been a beacon of light to people in the flat earth community, if you want to call it that. I've gotten to speak to people like Mark Sargent, Eric Dubé. I bought his book. He was a big inspiration for me. I've gotten to speak to so many cool people by doing this show. I've enjoyed my time with Dearth and with Matrix, but I need a break, and so that's what I'm going to do. But don't get despondent. We'll be back bigger and better than ever at some point in the future. But just for the time being, I need a break. So that's the answer to your question. And the good news is that not next week, but the week after, we're going to be having a season wrap where all of our past guests will be invited to come back and join us for like a celebration and a final bash. And I think it could be the best episode of the lot. So we've still got next week, and I'll talk more about this in a moment. And then we've got the week after, and hopefully you'll come and join us for that, Mark.
Yeah, I'll be glad to. That'd be fun. I'm sure it'll kick off if we're all there. It's got to kick off at some point, hasn't it? Someone's got to call someone a shill.
Off the air, I was chatting with Matrix and Dearth within the last 24 hours, and one of them was saying that they want to invite Matt Boylan on the show. Can you imagine getting Sergeant Dubé and Boylan on the one show? Oh boy, if we could do that, I think the internet would just about explode. But I'll tell you what, guys, it's getting to 1:30 in the morning, and I've got to get going. So I think it's time for our final thoughts. So what we're going to do is we'll go through Matrix, then Dearth, and then we'll come to you, WaykiWayki, for your final thoughts, and then we'll wrap the show up. So Matrix has been a big one. It's been a long one. We had a few technical difficulties at the start, but I think it's been a good show. And apart from my tiredness, I think it will be one that the listeners will mostly enjoy.
Yeah, it's been it's another good show, man. Technical difficulties, never mind that. I mean, Mark's covers lots of cool subjects. He really gets into the mind of the flat earther, and talks about it in his latest video, and I really enjoy his work. I think we talk a lot about the proofs and the problems with the ball model, but you're speculating about these things. I mean, Mark brings some evidence with what he's talking about, but the whole idea about speculating, I think it's a good thing to do that. It's about using the imagination. When you start to think outside the box that we've been kept in all this time, it's a necessary requirement to speculate and wonder and question and imagine. So I think these kind of, we're on this journey of discovery, and we're looking for answers, and I think it's a great process that we're all going through, and I've really enjoyed the show. It's been great with Mark Hoffman. So thanks, Mark.
I think that we've all been growing, all sorts of ways in this, and some of our hardest struggles help us grow the most. So in honor of that, I would like to have 10 seconds of pure silence and see how John handles it. Ready? Very good. John, how did you do?
I did really well, and neither of you guys suggested an outro song, so it looks like I'll be the one selecting, and I'll let you get in nice and quick and suggest one in the side chat there. WaykiWayki, you've been a terrific guest. Most of our listeners are familiar with your work, but for those who aren't, they can find you at WaykiWayki.com. You've got a website. You've been blogging there since 2008 by my research.
Something like that. Maybe a bit earlier. Yeah, something like that. Quite a long time. Yeah. So thanks, guys. It's been really good.
No, you're right, mate. So you've got 6 years worth of blog posts that people can check out. Flat Earth is not your only thing. In fact, up until last year, you were talking about all kinds of things. I saw your blog post about the Sydney Siege. I thought it was terrific. The Sydney Siege used to be my favourite topic until I learned about the lies of the Copernican system. So I recommend people go and check out your blog. If you've got the YouTube channel as well, I'll link underneath this video on YouTube to not only your most recent documentary, but also to your free book. Like I said, 100 pages on the moon. People should check it out. It's an easy read. You use pictures from our friend Rory Cooper to make it easy for people to follow. They can check it out. They can get in touch with you. And from what I can tell, you're easy to get in touch with. You do your best to get back to people. And I think that's one of the reasons why you've made all the good impressions that you have. So any final thoughts you want to leave listeners with? And then I'm going to play us out with some outro music.
Just keep researching, guys, keep doing your own thing. Try and keep away from the shill politics and enjoy your research as well. Enjoy it. It's a beautiful thing. It's an exciting thing. There's hardly many things more exciting than studying our reality with new eyes and realizing you're sort of above these sort of controllers because you've figured it out. I mean, their lies, they don't hit you anymore. So enjoy it.
Excellent stuff. Well, a huge personal thanks from me, and I know that in the live chat people have loved your contribution, so thank you so much, Mark. Now, as for me, I want to leave with just a couple of final thoughts. We will be having 2 more episodes for Season 1 of the Ball Earth Skeptic Roundtable. Next week, we're hoping to get on a Ball Earther to not necessarily debate with us, but to come on the show and to explain to us why they believe in the spinning ball model. Now, as many of our listeners know, I had a so-called debate with a Ball Earther relatively recently, and it was a disaster because that gentleman had done zero research into even his own spinning ball model, let alone the flat earth model. We're hoping to find someone who's actually looked into the flat earth and into the ball earth and wants to come on and discuss it with us in a rational, calm and civil way. And even though there are some people out there who might be critical of me, in certain facets of what I do, I don't think anyone can say objectively that I don't give people a fair go. So if you want to come on and have a debate about the shape of the earth, the best forum to do it will be this time next week. So if you're a ball earther or you know a ball earther who can have a rational debate in a calm and civil way and who can do their research before coming onto the show, get in touch with us. We'll try and get you on the show. And hopefully we can listen to the ball earth side, because right now it seems to me that the only people really arguing for the ball earth are the hopelessly devoted ball earthers who haven't actually done any research. Now, we're hoping to prove that theory wrong. Hopefully there are some good ball earthers out there. If you are one, if you know one, get in touch with us. And then, of course, the week after that will be episode 12, the season finale of season 1 of the Ball Earth Skeptic Roundtable, and we're going to be inviting back all of the guests from the first season. Now, some people might not be able to make it back for the show. Some of them might be able to make it back but might not want to. But any of them who do, we'll be getting in touch with them, and hopefully we're going to have ourselves a big kick-ass party of Ball Earth skepticism, and hopefully you guys can join us for that. I'm going to play us out right now with a song that means a lot to me. I know it means a lot to my friend David Weiss there in New York. Tonight you've been joined by David Weiss, deep inside the rabbit hole, New York, Matrix Decode, live from Spain via London, and our special guest, WaykiWayki, again from Spain via London. I'm your host, John LeBon, and it is now August the 13th, 1:30 in the morning, Brisbane time, so I need to go and get some shut-eye. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you guys next week, and I'm going to play you out with some hot shit.